No one's watching.
It's so weird to me that I can still hear you. Well, usually, like Father Eric totally kicks us out while the countdown is going.
Oh,
Like
does he?
everything about it is so weird.
Oh, we do have watchers. Excellent.
Oh.
All right. Welcome in, everybody. I don't know where Gustav's is, so that's disappointing. And dozens of other people I might have expected, but that's okay. We've got Castle. He's my brother in lobster, so it's I don't know where you came up with that. It should be fine. So this is week 3. We'll be covering rules 5 and 6. Rule 5 is do not let your children do anything that makes you dislike them. Although I don't know what chapter 5 is about because it's only nominally about that. And rule 6, which is, I think, I like chapter 6. Set your house in perfect order before you criticize the world, because I thought it was short, concise, and more clear. Although I've got my critiques there. So yeah, Castle, you want to state your sort of intention for this session?
Yeah, absolutely. So, just a quick little thing about the brother on lobster thing. So last week we had the whole deal about surrounding yourself with people who want the best for you and everything. So I had a sort of thing where a buddy of mine's wife, who's also a buddy of mine, had a birthday party. Her dad was there, and he told me that I'm part of the family now. So I've been adopted, which means that now I'm my buddy-in-law's brother-in-law. So that's pretty much, and then in keeping with the theme here. But then just kind of thinking about that, now we've got, don't let your children do anything that makes you dislike them. And I think, that sort of responsibility also extends to other people, like not just your children and not just necessarily the parents of particular people. But there's, you think of like that it takes a village to raise someone, but also
Yep.
like there's still ongoing formation even for people who are not children. I mean, there's lots of things you got to fill in the gaps. People don't know stuff. And also, every now and then, like a person's personality might wind up sort of manifesting differently, depending, or maybe their virtue or lack of virtue might manifest differently in different scenarios. So sometimes you also have to give that negative or positive signal to encourage the good behaviors, get rid of the bad ones, and everything. And I think that
Right.
it's a very merciful thing to even have that done to you, even when you make the mistake. Because it's like, well,
Right.
you can continue being wrong all the time, or you can just be wrong right now and then not anymore in this regard, as long as you actually listen. So yeah, and then so my intention pretty much, and I think this is going to wind up kind of fueling my reflection later on. We'll see. We'll do the exploration and everything, but really kind of leaning into that, just understanding the value of. There's a line that he has here that if you care for someone, don't let them become an object for the contempt of others. And I
Right.
think that's the best thing. It's just, better me, letting you know that you got something in your teeth, or that you, like, in a more abstract sense, like you got something in the teeth of your personality or something like that. It's better that you hear it from me rather than you go out there and get absolutely wrecked by, some people who don't care at all.
Yeah.
So just kind of keeping that sort of thing of just making little nudges for people to try to help them, be better. And then also just knowing that, every teacher learns something. So if you're kind of nudging someone on, it also kind of puts that, and I think this will also have a connection to the following chapter. There's also something where you now present the ideal and you make a correction, and it's like now you have to live up to that. And there's a
Right.
big advantage to that too, where it's like not just, oh great, now I have more responsibility, but it's like, no, now I have someone that I've encouraged, and now that's motivation for me to be better too.
Yeah, exactly. Well, you have to be better to encourage somebody else. And
Mm-hmm.
so
Yeah.
that virtuous cycle sort of kicks in there. So yeah, I mean, my intention is always, as your guide through the book club, uh, is to eviscerate Peterson where appropriate, praise him on the small occasions. But I think these 2 chapters in particular are really about attention. because that's all he's talking about. And this has been a theme that I have been pondering for a while after I noticed something, which I need to get back to my Substack and write an article. Hopefully I'll get to do that this coming week here um, about that, about the misplaced attention problem, or misplaced, quote, empathy, even though I don't believe in empathy in any reasonable fashion. Excuse me. So, yeah, I mean, I'm just, my job is to set the attention of the group, whether they be here in person, which you can do by joining the Mark of Wisdom Discord server and popping in to pay attention, and the link should be in there. Or people watching, interacting live chat, or people just watching and hopefully commenting later to boost the stats on these wonderful and time-consuming videos. I did once again manage to not read the night before, which again I still contend is an advantage, although setting aside enough time just before this happens is getting tricky, especially because I continue to not be able to get up at 5 a.m. like I used to. And so, yeah, with that, we'll jump right in. So this first rule, do not let children do anything that makes you dislike them, I have renamed as children have not been properly formed by neglectful parents who over-identify with them. That's my name for this chapter. So,
It's a little on the long side, but I'm here for it.
well, he's doing long ones. I had to do long ones. I had to point out all the things he was pointing out without realizing it. And I think those are the things he doesn't really understand, is the neglectful parent aspect of what he's talking about. And he really doesn't have an understanding of formation. Although he mentions all the elements of formation, which it's always fascinating to me when people have all the pieces and they can't put them together. I'm like, really? But it's a low comprehension world, high literacy, low comprehension world, as I might in fact have a live stream on, because I do. See, navigating patterns for more on that topic. So, did you have any sort of general questions, Castle, about the rule or what you think Peterson was going for, or the chapter sort of in general?
As far as questions go, I mean, I think he has a whole sort of section where he muses on sort of wondering, like, is it the case that there are no bad children? Like, are there any inherently bad children? And then he asks the question, where does the corruption originate? And I mean, if you're stuck on the science-y frame, like, of course, you're going to probably spin your wheels on that. I think it's an interesting sort of thing. But I like the point about the neglect of early formation. I mean, you see the sort of thing a lot of times, like I've witnessed people talking about, like, oh, their parenting strategy when the kid is crying is just leave them alone. Like the 2-week-old, just let them cry it out.
Pure state of nature, they'll be fine.
It's just like, my goodness, you hear that stuff and it's just like, oh, why is that? Or you look at a lot of these things, like you look at the stuff like the correlation between people who commit certain terroristic acts, that type of thing, and it's just like, oh, you see that the vast majority of them spent an extremely long amount of time in daycares and stuff like that, and it's a lot of this just kind of outsourcing or just not sourcing at all formation,
unsourcing.
Just unsourcing. And so you wonder, like, oh yeah, what happened here? And it's just like, well, yeah, they've got no roots, like there is no grounding at all. And so it's like, oh wow, they went off out of nowhere. It's like, yeah, of course they did.
So yeah, and I just wanted to point out for the audience, if we are following this rough format, right? So if you have general questions about the rule, put them in the live chat, and we'll try to go over them. So yeah, sort of the general thoughts is, this is another perfect example of Peterson rambling. Chapter 5 in particular is, or rule 5 here, when he's going over it, is particularly rambly. And he really isn't sticking to the topic very well at all. I mean, he's poking at it and he's hinting at it and he's pointing towards it all the time, but Yeah, I don't think he did a very good job here. Um, Even though I love the contents of the chapter. I'm just like, but just isn't it doesn't conform to the title. And that violates my writing sensibilities.
Mm,
So as an officially published author, I can pull that card now. So thank you,
yeah.
Castle. Yeah, and I think that's sort of part of the problem is that he really isn't dialed in here. He's really trying to tie things together and do an exploration, which is there's nothing wrong with that. It's his book. He can do what he wants. Uh, but I would prefer the titles be called "Exploring the Idea of" instead of "I'm going to tell you this thing" when he's not always sort of conforming to that.
Mm,
Um, but yeah, I mean, I liked the all the topics he went into in this chapter. I thought they were actually interesting and well structured, and yeah, just a master class on having all the right pieces and not being able to put them together at all. It's like, well, because a lot of the material he could have repetitively, which works. We can all hate repetition, but it works. It's remarkably effective. Um, he could have repeatedly tied it back to the topic, like to the
mm.
title, very easily. And he just absolutely is too busy having fun on his little exploration to do so. So yeah, those are sort of my general thoughts. Anything else before we dive into exploration here?
Not particularly. I mean, I think for the reasons you just mentioned, I'm looking forward to the exploration part because that's what this was. I mean, I want to say read time for this chapter was what, like hour and a half, 2 hours, something like that, just for this
Yeah,
one.
the read time on
And
this was like 2 hours.
yeah, I think we have something actually even greater than that coming up next week, but just spoilers for the folks at home. But yeah, I mean, I think it's definitely very exploratory. I'm looking forward to the exploration, and then we'll see what comes up there.
Cool. Yeah, I noticed we didn't get our troublesome priest. So now I'm very
Hmm,
upset. Yeah, I
yeah.
should be upset at. Excellent. That'll help. You want to see anger and resentment? I'll show you anger and resentment. Yeah. So let's dive in. Um, yeah, sort of the theme in the beginning is just lazy parenting. So, you know, but I do like to he like brings up freedom without risk. And if you really want to talk about risk, you really want to read Taleb's work, all of it. Just grab all his books, except his very first book, Dynamic Hedging, is impenetrable and unimportant. But Fooled by Randomness and Black Swan and um, oh, what are the other ones? Skin in the Game and Anti-Fragile are all excellent books. I did them slightly out of order. Oh well. I love when my brain corrects me at the end, and then we have a fight about why you would betray me in that way. It's always good. Um, but yeah, if you want risk, he's better on risk and Pareto principle and all that. Taleb has this all dialed in, and his books are easier to read. So, and to that point, I should have mentioned earlier. Yeah, read time is like 2 hours taking notes. So, yeah, if you're not taking notes, are you reading? I have questions. I have questions. Um, so yeah, just wanted to fill in read time there, especially for the purpose of the book club. Right? We're not reading for pleasure here. This isn't
Mhm.
entertainment. This is growth that we cannot obtain by ourselves, right? In any context, book or no, right? It's 10 books, doesn't matter. Can't obtain the kind of perspectival um, expansion of the world that you get from multiple perspectives actually interacting in real time. Not what a book can do for you. Um,
Mhm.
so yeah, this idea of freedom without risk, I thought was super good, and I think that Peterson really missed a chance here to talk about the male aspect of what he's on about, right? Where, and this is like our good friend Elizabeth and who else harps on this? But quite a few of the women harp on Peterson's too rough on the women. He blames the women for everything. And that's correct, right? Because the real theme in the beginning here should be more about a lack of fathering or strong male presence. Now, strong male presence actually works in two distinct ways that overlap and seem the same, but they are not, right? If you think in terms of tyranny, they'll seem exactly the same because you're in a flat world and you're blind and you can't differentiate. One is to control the woman's emotional state, and the other one is to control the child and teach the child how to be controlled. Now, those are A, implemented completely differently, and B, they're not the same thing, even though you kind of have to use the same words to talk about them. So, the way you cause children to be behaved is through exemplification. The way you control, we'll say, women's emotions when they get out of control is not through exemplification. Women admire male exemplification. So I think this is a full-on swing and a miss for Peterson in that particular part, which, again, is super disappointing for me because I felt like there was an opportunity for him to give men in particular something to do, something to think about, and something to strive for.
Yeah, I definitely. So I actually had a note here even that just says women teaching boys respect for women. And I do think there's a certain element of participation there where it's like, okay, well, you're, and you have a video that just came out yesterday about women maturing sooner than men. There is an element of, okay, I'm going to participate in a way with a woman who is also older and can kind of, provide her element of formation and everything, and kind of understand like, okay, this is what this dynamic looks like, but also that's extremely lopsided. There is, to your point, like no mention really of, I think, aside from just his own experiences dealing with kids, there's not really anything in abstraction the way he does everything else. Talking about like the male exemplification for the boys or anything like that. It really is all just focused on the feminine there, which is very interesting.
Yeah, it is a valid critique by a few of the women who follow Peterson and actually like him enough to comment instead of getting angry that he sucks when it comes to this particular issue and overemphasizes the wrong things. But it's good to know. Like, it's good to know, oh, there is a template, an ideal, an archetype of a male embodiment that is missing, and that causes the overprotection of children by women. Right. Because that gives you some control over the situation, right? Where you're not just, because the new trend is to have a soy dad or something. And it like that got pointed out the other day on Twitter. And I was just like, yeah, this is going to be a big problem. We're going to have fathers who stay in the home and who are weak. Or you get somebody like the Collins lesbians, because there's no man in that relationship. I can tell you that much. Where, you don't have that ideal, that exemplar of male stability and male pragmatism and sort of male containment, right, through strength, because men contain through strength largely, not entirely, and not all, but that's your problem, not the world's problem. The world is still more than one or two examples. So there's always that. But then, unfortunately, I think that Peterson, I don't know, doubles down on his errors. He goes into garbage materialism, talking about genes and limits on birth. And I'm like, what are we talking about here? What can we get back to children and doing things and dislike? Those would be the core topics, Jordan. Could you please come back to that? So that was somewhat disappointing, at least for me.
Yeah. I don't know. So I actually don't remember why this note came up. He had a part where he says Wikipedia is the perfect place to find accepted wisdom because it's produced collectively.
Yes.
And I mean, I don't. Maybe I should have had that in the question section. I'm curious about your thoughts on that one, because I was like, it's interesting because in a certain sense, the statement, it's the perfect place to find accepted wisdom, is
Yes.
not necessarily incorrect by any means, you know.
Well, I think that's the problem. Like, if your issue is that you're taking something like wisdom and reducing it down to truth, or tying it in any way, shape, or form to truth, you're going to run into a problem with your definition of wisdom immediately. Don't do that. Don't make that mistake. That mistake has been made many times, and it ends badly every time it's made. And I think that's what Peterson's suffering from here. On the other hand, you can interpret it charitably and say accepted wisdom, was they not true wisdom, right? You could play that game. I even reading this again, I was like, oh, he's going to use the word zeitgeist, right? No, or zeitgeist accepted pattern or something. Did he do that? No. I'm like, Dr. Peterson, please let me help you. You seem confused. But I think I understand what he's getting at. Feeling instead of wisdom would have been the right word. Sort of generally socially accepted feeling. Yes. Which then gets mimicked because it's been promulgated on the internet, which is the lovely technology that promulgates whatever you put on it. And most of the things people have are bad. So that might tell you everything you need to know about the internet. Let me just Noah, good to see you, Noah. He identifies a pattern of innocence and perfection, begins to identify them in secular forms, right? Beginning with Rousseau and the negative pointing at instantiation. Yeah, we'll get to Rousseau, don't worry. He gets to Rousseau and then mentions Rousseau later, which I find interesting. I mean, I'm sure he's not stupid. He knows that. But yeah, so Rousseau comes up in my notes and then he mentions Rousseau like 3 chapters later. I'm like, oh, okay. Or not 3 paragraphs later, sorry. Each paragraph in this chapter felt like a chapter. I'm going to stand by that assessment. Yeah, I hope that was helpful. No, you don't have to delete your messages. No, it's fine. Yeah, the garbage materialism talk did no good at all. And in my notes, I have like confidence conveyed to the unworthy, right, results in resentment. So while confidence may have worked in Freud's time with intact households, it's a misread post 1960, and that I think is something that Peterson himself should have caught, right? And so because he's quoting Freud about this whole idea that you convey confidence to your children and that makes them stronger, right? But he's got an inherent contradiction later on in what he's saying. And I think that's due to the fact that if you give your kid undue confidence in their abilities, when they go out into the world and they try to do things, they're going to be angry and resentful because the predictions aren't going to match. And that theme is going to come up again and again and again in this chapter in the form of Peterson not talking about it, but it being very clear from what he's writing, which I find fascinating. I wonder if he goes to a psychiatrist. He needs someone to help him with this stuff. Seriously, bro. Like, you're dancing around something for no reason. Like, this is really like just adding those 2 elements would have made this chapter 100 times better, right? Like, be a man, step up, be an exemplar, and also, be such a good provider who provides all the right things for the women in your life, right? Not just your wife either, right? All the women around you, right? And all the women that you encounter, by the way, right? That's, you can call that chivalry or whatever if you want. I don't care what you call it. It's still the right answer, the truth, the goodness, and it's beautiful when it's done. So there's your 3 freaking transcendentals. I'll probably never do that again, but I'm going to do that now because I did. So yeah, I mean, I thought that was, again, another sort of opportunity for him to understand, yeah, in Freud's time that would have worked, and the same thing's being done now, and it can't work because we're not in Freud's time and something has changed, and that's single mother households, right? Or single mother catastrophes that sometimes we tack inappropriate words onto, like households, or raising a child as a single mother. That's not happening. And that is kind of what that's what causes the meaning crisis. Um, yeah, that story of the psychiatrist's or psychologist's child who was nurtured and formed back to health, uh,
Mm,
in spite of his uncaring mother. I mean, the only reason he was there was because there was no daycare. I'm sorry, the nanny was sick, right, and got into an accident or something. Um, that's a resentful mother, right? Resentful of better mothering, jealousy at its best. And I think again, that's something that, you know, had she been in a healthy two-parent relationship, the husband would have mitigated for her, right? He would have said, now, don't be angry. The kid's doing well. Like, something perfectly reasonable
yeah,
to give contrast. Because one of the problems when you're doing things by yourself is you actually can't see by definition. You have no contrast, right? Or limited contrast. And so your eyes to see are limited. And yeah, before I get into a positive, did you wanna pile on this rabbit pile?
yeah. So, and just really quickly, the contrast thing, it really is, I mean, you could experience this like the depth perception problem of only having one eyeball, like even if you just cover one up for a while and just try doing that for like a few hours, I mean, that's kind of a silly thing, but you get an eye patch or something. Some people have that
No
sort of
one
thing.
would do that.
Yeah, yeah.
That's ridiculous.
And
Worse if they tried to do it on a live that's nuts. It's
yeah,
insane.
let alone every week, completely insane. So,
Every Friday,
the,
yeah.
so but also it's really interesting because I have here in the notes, you've got a part where he mentions the consequences of coddling people. And then soon thereafter, he goes and he talks about confidence of success leading to real success. And it's just like, well, there is a certain element of like the confident expectation of, okay, this is totally going to happen. Now, a lot of times that's based on, like that isn't, you can contrast that with presumption, I guess, like, oh yeah, this will be
Mhm.
totally fine. I'm just going to invade Russia in the winter or something like that, or
Exactly.
it'll be great. Uh, it's like, yeah, we'll see how that goes. Um, but it's interesting because then he goes and he talks about that woman's child and that, I guess what it was. I don't know if this was the same kid. I think he might have mentioned a couple of kids. I might be mixing up the chapters,
You
but
mentioned a couple, yeah.
yeah, the one there was a kid that wasn't being fed by the neighbors, and then Tammy was like really patient and fed the kid, and then the kid started like following her around all over the place and everything just because she gave him a little bit of patience and encouragement. And he says, she didn't let him fail, and it's
Right,
interesting. Like there is that thing of in a certain sense, there were attempts that didn't work out. Like she was there, and then he just didn't do the thing. But she
right,
didn't allow that to be a failure condition.
right,
And so, whereas that was essentially what he was experiencing at the other place, like the neighbors were not feeding him, so it's like they let him fail,
right, right.
and it's just like, look, the kid can't even do the basics. Like, why are you letting him? And that also too, like, if he's completely under your care, like that is actually your failure if you're choosing for this to be a failure condition. So I just thought that was a nice little few, even though it wasn't explored to the degree that I wanted it to. I liked the nice 3 points of contrast of, you can coddle people and then wind up setting them on a bad road. And then you've got the confidence of success leading to success hypothetically works if the conditions are right. Like if you actually have the capacity to succeed, then okay, that's great if you're confident. But if it's like, if you have no chance, then, and absolutely no tools or support or anything like that, then it's not good to be confident of an outcome
Yeah,
that you can't attain. And then this of just, especially when it comes to you have the sort of top down assistance happening where Tammy is being the authority for the kid and is actually properly covering him until he's fine. And then, you have the unfortunate ending of then he goes off basically just, never to be seen again or whatever. So it's, I don't know, more negative contrast, but I did find that useful.
yeah, and I think that's really the problem. I mean, I hate doing these things, but people will find them useful, and you should use things you find useful. Just try not to overuse them because they have limits. Um, one way to think about what you see in the world today is just misplaced confidence, right? And so arrogant people have too much confidence. That's the definition of arrogance, by the way. They're confident about things that they're actually wrong about. And a lot of people don't, they read confident people who are right as being arrogant, and that you're just screwing yourself there, right? You've got to determine if they're actually making claims that they're wrong about confidently, right? Like you can make claims that you don't know, right? You could say like, well, I'm not really sure about this, but that's never arrogant, right? Or you can make claims that you're right about. Like I can tell you for sure the internet has been a negative force overall. That's just, it's a measurable thing. Like there's almost no dissension on that point. That's not me being arrogant. It's me reporting data. Right? So, right. So you have to be able to differentiate those things. But the other side of that is that you're confident and incapable because you've been given confidence about the wrong things. Like if you're told that you're a good singer and you're not a good singer, and the industry doesn't pick you up and make you famous, it could make you angry and resentful pretty easily. And so if you think of the world in a dichotomy, which I don't recommend you do because I have videos on binary thinking and why it's bad and all that, but also this is a useful enough framework. If you think about it as misplaced confidence, either confidence in the wrong things, but it can go either way, right? It can make you overconfident and arrogant, or it can make you resentful, right? Or not enough confidence, which actually looks the same, right? roughly speaking. So you can't even tell which it is, but that balance of confidence and forming someone's confidence over time to be appropriately located is super important, right? And that way you don't have kids that do things that make you dislike them, right? Because one of the things people dislike is when people are trying to do something they can't do and then they get angry.
Yeah.
It's like, well, I don't know why you're getting angry about that. Like maybe you just can't do it and you should like do something you can do. Like that's always an option. A lot of people get caught up with, well, I want to do this now, but that's actually hedonism. People don't think of it that way because it's not, sex, drugs, and alcohol, but also it's hedonism. That's what it is, right? Like, oh, I want this now, and I don't want anything else. It's like, well, yeah, it's also being a 2-year-old. Weird how those have a 100% overlap. Moving right along.
I think I think it's very useful as well. I mean, you look at these guys like like Simon Cowell back when he was doing like the American Idol thing, where that he would just shut people down right away, even if they were kind of decent. But it was just one of the things where even if maybe he was wrong 1% of the time or something, like if we're just kind of granting, but the fact is that it's just like, oh, this guy is so mean. It's like, no, he's trying to give you the proper signal so that in his own sort of way, like I'm not going to claim this guy's, like a Cistercian monk or something like that, but at the same time, the guy is going and saying, not that those guys are 100% always like on the ball either, but he goes and says, like, I don't want this person to waste their life on something that they're not going to, and maybe they go off and like, in spite of him, actually succeed or something. And maybe that worked out, but maybe I mean, that's also a great one, but also it's like, well, maybe that was motivation for them, but also sometimes maybe they wound up making compromises that they wouldn't have wanted to make. Maybe it was at an enormous cost that they could have done something that they might have actually been better at. Like maybe they were actually really good at this, but they were much better at something else, and now they're not doing that thing. So I mean,
he said that once in an interview. He said, like, no, these people are wasting their lives. He's like, they're never going to get there, ever. And they need to be told that. And you could look at somebody like Kesha, who I think was a backup singer for Britney Spears or something. But she launched her own career. And man, did they ran her through a ringer. That's a horrific story. Because she was in that milieu of that type of pop music at the time when it was popular and everything. And they pretty much... lawsuits and some of the claims in the lawsuits, I'm just like, I know enough. I'm not going to take any deeper here. The Hollywood stuff, you want to stay away from all Hollywood lawsuits. It will make you lose all hope for justice and all hope for entertainment at the same time. But it will also give you that deep Lovecraftian dread of how low humanity can go. So it's like a threefer. Do not recommend. So
I'm ready to move along.
I like the point, and I've always loved this point. He makes it in the Maps of Meaning course lecture series all the time. The things that occur every single day make up our lives. And so to me, you want lost opportunity of all time, like for real, like of all time. Imagine claiming to be, like a Christian apologist is what they're calling them. Why they call themselves, I don't know. I think strategically that's already a loss. But and then not saying, Peterson says the things that occur every single day are the things that make up your life. We describe that as a liturgy, so maybe you should be careful which liturgy you are adopting. Imagine not doing that and calling yourself a Christian. I'm like, you guys are all bad at what you do. You're all really bad at it, and you have no idea how bad at it you are. There, fixed. Like, right? Inarguable automatically. But no one does that. These guys are all terrible. I'm like, and then it's no wonder people are like, and Peterson's going to be a Christian any day. I was like, oh, you guys are just seeing everything backwards, and it hurts my brain. It makes me cry. It absolutely makes me cry. So yeah, every time somebody says like, I'm a Christian apologist, I'm like, really? I wouldn't want to be identified that way at all, because y'all suck. Peterson's doing a better job, and he ain't even a Christian. So it's terrible.
It's always
the self-help book, Castle. It's a freaking self-help. When self-help beats your Bible, you're in trouble.
It's rough, and that's one of those difficulties. I mean, I know something that's come up a lot, and you've got like the identification against thing, but then there's also the dangers of identifying for something and then not actually delivering. And it's just like it's like having a pizza joint and then saying like, oh yeah, we deliver in 30 minutes or less, and then you never do that. And it's just like that actually winds up becoming judgment on you. It's just like, yeah, all you had to do is not say that you were going to deliver this, like you just say, we'll get there when we get there. Like that might actually sell better.
We deliver eventually.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, the same sort of thing where I see people taking on these additional adjectives, or they sort of self-title. People have been self-titling at least for hundreds of years, but definitely like way longer than that. But people have been like really just publicly just slapping additional titles on themselves, and like, oh, look at all the different things I'm doing, and it's very dangerous. I mean, you put these things on, and it's just like now if you're gonna say, oh, I'm an expert in something, like that's kind of mostly what I'm pointing to, is like I'm an expert in this particular thing, is that you better actually be that kind of thing. Like it was as recently as yesterday, I heard about there was a lawyer that someone was dealing with that, the lawyer made them wait 6 weeks for some sort of letter that they were putting out, and they discussed some very important points. And then the lawyer shares the letter and says, hey, this is what I'm going to send out, full of typos and didn't have the core points. And it's just like, why are you, professing to be in this profession, So that's the same. I don't know. I don't want to go too. Yeah. Now we're doing the chapter 5 thing.
No, pretty much. Yeah. He started it. It's like, excuse. I also want to point out, like, the time spent on doing things over and over again, sort of thing, like brushing your teeth every day, sort of stuff. That is also how you build momentum. And there was a great video somewhere on the internet. I think it was on Navigating Patterns. A wonderful video about momentum. Presenters a little, but it was good material, so it doesn't matter. But you need to be able to discern good momentum from bad momentum. That's why I said like all the apologists should just die of the shame of not taking Peterson's the things you do every day or most of your life and running with it. They should have run with that. That was a gift handed to you that you could have run with, and you fumbled badly. It's just so terrible. It just, it's
Mm,
awful. But you still need to discern good habits from bad habits. For example, if you wanted to put it in purely secular language, I guess if we must, we must. Um, so yeah, I mean, these are the more important sorts of things to think about, and it relates to children in that you have to form that for children, and the odds are that it wasn't formed for you, and if it wasn't formed for you, the odds are that it wasn't formed for your parents either, and that is, I'm going to go back over that for sure because it comes up later in
mm,
the chapter as well. That is a big miss for me with Peterson is he doesn't understand the depth of the problem he's talking about. He sees it as very proximal, and that it's weird because no matter whenever anybody talks about like a large scale cultural problems, the 1960s comes up every single time, right? Like, it may not be the only thing that comes up, but it's always in the mix. And we're not learning that lesson. Like we haven't quite figured that out. What is it about the 1960s, or better yet, what caused the 1960s to be that way? But they're not. They're so close yet so far away.
mm,
Um, and then he again, he doesn't mention Rousseau here, but he talks about this pure childhood nature concept, which that exists, right? That's a thing for sure. Um, but I think what he misses is that it's not just Rousseau, but that's the compression of time, right? Like as though children aren't something that needs to be formed, right? Like in some sense, they're fully formed when they come out, which he does explicitly mention at one point too. But I felt like, man, he could have really pressed on that whole idea, right? But he definitely didn't.
mm. Yeah, it was very interesting. I mean, just kind of coming back a little bit to the things that occur every single day make up most of our lives, and then he uses again a lot more negative contrast. He has the guy that for some reason he hates because the guy let his kid watch Elmo, and the
Well,
kid, you know, I mean, of all guys, the what do you say, the division among the Muppets here, but he has the thing about waste of time adding up dramatically over time. It was something like the guy wound up spending something like what the equivalent of a month out of a year or something like that, or maybe it was like a couple of weeks out of a year just arguing with his kid about bedtime. Like that's probably
yeah,
not the only time he's arguing with this kid.
right,
Uh,
right.
and so he's just spending all of his time doing that. And it's like, yeah, that is also going to wind up having effects on everything that connects around that. So it's just like, well, if you're arguing with your kid all the time, that is also going to affect breakfast, right? Like that's
Yeah,
going to affect
yeah,
taking him to school. That's going to affect all of these other things. And like you're eating dinner, dreading bedtime, right? Like you basically just everything has been poisoned at that point. And but to contrast that in a positive way, the same sort of thing happens when you're building up this momentum with positive behaviors. That
right.
the same way that you can poison the well of everything you're doing, it's kind of that saying. Is like how you do anything is how you do everything.
Yeah,
And it's like, well, if you are actively keeping little things where, okay, I just finished a major part of my day, and then now I've got like a little bit of idle time, you've got these little bits of maintenance that you can do throughout the day that will allow you to kind of keep going. And you see, that way you don't have like a post lunch crash. That is such a crazy idea to me now. Where I would totally feel that. Like when I was in middle school, for example, like post lunch crash was totally a thing, like every day. I have no idea what that feels like anymore. Like I remember it, but it's just not a thing anymore because I just don't lose momentum at that time of the day anymore. Whereas you can kind of let yourself crash at the end of the day so that you can actually fall asleep. Um,
right.
but yeah, there's just something really valuable about that. Just knowing that you can kind of, instead of poisoning everything, you can sort of sweeten everything by
Purify.
making sure that, yeah, purify exactly. And
Yeah,
And you even see this with like athletes and stuff, where you get the guys that would say like amateur athletes, where they go and they're running throughout like an urban environment or something like that, and people will have like heart issues, or like someone might actually have an actual heart attack because they're sprinting through the streets and then they stop at a stoplight and stop moving. Or you
Yep.
get those guys that you see like competitors in athletic competitions will go and they'll do something extremely strenuous and then they just drop on the ground. It's like, dude, you're
Right.
gonna have a heart attack. Like, you're not supposed to do that. You need to like walk in circles or something like that. This is not okay.
You need to ramp
And
down. Yeah.
yeah, whereas if not, it's like, okay, your heart just hit a brick wall. Like, and what is that going to do to you? How is that going to like affect tomorrow or 10 years from now? And the same thing applies with all of this other stuff. Like, it may not be so immediately apparent as, oh, you just stopped running after a 20-minute sprint
Right.
or something, but it'll still have those long lasting effects. And yeah,
Right. When you don't know what they are going to be for you, even
right,
if you know what they might be.
yeah, yeah.
Because people get confused. Oh, I know what it might be. It's like it doesn't help you at all, but good luck, I guess. Can't
Mhm.
assess risk on might be's, that's for sure. It's like assessing risk on top of risk. Yeah, I think the reason why people like this chapter, who I my impression, and it's just an impression, is that this is one of the better liked chapters for people who are single. And I think the reason why, and I've contemplated doing a video on this because I get that semi series that I talk about. You have no
Mhm.
idea what Peterson did, and then I kind of show you something that people didn't realize Peterson was doing. This is the Papa Peterson phenomena right here in this chapter. This is Peterson giving you ways to bring yourself up. See my 2 videos on immaturity, navigating patterns. That's what this is. This is Peterson. It's not parenting advice for parents. It's parenting advice for you, for Muppets like yourself, Muppets who have not even purchased a mug yet, but should at the link in the description. Anyway, uh, some marketing opportunity. I'm just trying it out, Castle. I'm just trying it out. Yeah, and I think maybe that's the video I'll record before I jet off here for vacation, or maybe I'll have to bring some equipment and record it on vacation. I don't know. We'll see. We'll see how the trip goes here. See how my packing goes tonight. I gotta pack tonight, pack and prep tonight. But yeah, I mean, I think that's why people like this chapter, because it teaches you how to help bring yourself up by paying attention to certain things that you probably weren't paying attention to before, right? And that helps you to mature yourself, which of course can be done, but you know, is not preferable, but might be necessary these past 2, maybe 3 generations now, depending upon how you count these things. Um, but then Peterson launches into this thing where he's talking about blaming something other than original sin. And he's looking at faraway solutions rather than trying to change things directly in front of you. And this shows up in cause-based reasoning all the time. People go like, well, what's the cause of this thing we need to solve? And it's like, I is that the conversation we should have? Maybe the conversation we should have is how can we solve this? Because people tend to want to dig into the past to find out, well, something happened, when they could be using a solution at hand that doesn't prevent them from digging into the past to find out what happened. And I think Peterson kind of falls into this as a sciencey guy. Sciencey guys tend to go backwards into axioms because they want to discover the axioms that control the universe or something stupid that science can't do. And so they're geared that way. Like science has shifted. It wasn't always that way. Pre-Einstein, it certainly wasn't that way at all. But yeah, science is sort of morphed into this monster that's always why they say we can't go back. The only ones that can go back are the science people. We can't go back as a group. No, no, no. We'll lead you to the back, to the Neoplatonism or the particle physics theory or whatever nonsense, whatever nonsense they think they're smart at. They always go back to that and tell you can't go back. Only they can go back. But Peterson, seems to kind of fall into that to some extent in this chapter. And there's something about I'm always trying to work these things through. Um, and it's weird that he casts parents as worried about um, concerned about their children's impression of them, like as though their children are their judge or something. That's how he casts it in the chapter, and I'm like, no, they're likely just hurt and confused by bad advice and poor results, and they're probably terrified by their strategies failing and society expecting the same outcome and both parties being disappointed and expressing it incorrectly. So if you raise your children according to whatever Wikipedia societal norms or what did he call it?
Accepted wisdom.
Accepted wisdom, right? The people around you are going to be disappointed when those results don't manifest, and they're going to be mad at you because you must have done something wrong. You implemented it incorrectly. And you're going to be disappointed because you're expecting the results. So it's two different types of disappointment. One's outside, one's inside, right? And do you know where you end and other things begin? I doubt it. And so, yeah, that to me is sort of a deep problem. Because he doesn't seem to consider that case, right? He's making it all about a single flat relationship, like, oh, the relationship of the parent and the child is inverted, the children are judging the parents, and I'm like, no. There's better explanations that are simpler and far more reasonable and actually match observation. So I thought that was a good miss. Your 3 hours is an optimistic idea. Anyway, let's see if I can fix that. So, yeah, sure, don't let your kids do anything that makes you dislike them because you're a person too. And that is a better guide than they are small adults. And formation matters, though. That's the message that I think Peterson should have sent here, right? And of course, the real problem is the rise of psychology caused all of this, like actually, but very well documented. Right, which is why Peterson doesn't see it that way, right? He's still in the perfect state of nature himself, and that perfect state of quote nature somehow involves science. I actually don't know how, because I just think everybody who's in science just has a bad definition of science, and they should wake up. I could continue zipping, or if you have an interjection point here, Castle, feel free.
Yeah. So I think just, he has a line that doesn't get a lot of attention where he says solving private problems is not done by social revolutions. And then he has a bit right after that where he talks about, the parents being terrified of their children, but especially a denial of the role as agents of discipline. And so I just see a pretty strong link between those two things. So this, he's putting it within the parental frame of denying their own roles as agents of discipline. But then you have the issue of solving private problems is not done by social revolutions. And it's like, yeah, there isn't a need to go and start outsourcing all of these additional things and all these people have to change and stuff. And he's openly talked about this, like with the gender identity stuff and everything. But a lot of times it winds up being stuck in these particular frames, and it seems like it kind of jumps from frame to frame, but not necessarily like in a more broader sense. I've tended to see. So I just thought I just wanted to kind of point that out. I guess that I guess just the difficulty of the framing here, that a lot of times it winds up getting a little pigeonholed, but not just into one. It's like a few different ones, and not really put as kind of like a more general frame to be applied.
Yeah, and I think that's due to the individualism, because at one point he says every individual is a follower of an influential philosopher, right? But individuals don't exist still. And to the extent that some might try to be an individual, they would have to follow an influential philosopher, which incidentally would make the philosopher effectively their god, just for your information, right? And so this goes back to something that I like to point out to people. If you believe you do not have a religion, one will be provided to you without your knowledge or consent. That's effectively what I'm saying here. It's effectively what Peterson's kind of almost alluding to, but badly, because he's stuck in individualistic frame still. And he thinks there's such a thing as an individual, when clearly it's not possible. Like, you were born into a world from parents, and you relied on them quite a bit when you were younger. And maybe they failed to form you correctly. That doesn't mean you're an individual. That means you're still a child and haven't matured. See my 2 videos now on maturity, both of which are excellent. I've heard I heard a rumor that just the graphics on one of them will help you mature. So that's rather
Sounds
handy.
accurate to me.
It does. It does. Someone was very happy about that, by the way. So thank you. Yeah, and he brings up the noble savage, and he talks about it as an ideal, and I'm like, the noble savage is an impossible and nonsensical fantasy. It's not an ideal. It's not anything that remotely resembles an ideal, which of course flipped my brain into, boy, Mark, now you need a definition of ideal. I was like, yeah, I kind of do. But I think my short form, quick, off the cuff, not definitive, might change my mind in 4 seconds. Definition would be something like, if there's no element of that ideal that can be implemented, then it's not an ideal, right? Or
Mm.
if there's no element of the pattern being proposed can be implemented, it's not any kind of ideal for any kind of thing. It's an identification against reality or fantasy. Fantasy isn't, but can stray into, or maybe fantasy by definition is an identification against reality. But I don't want to define every single word in this chain, because that'll get messy fast, and we'll be here for like 10 hours instead of hopefully only 3. And he gets stuck in dualism with this good and evil, and he stays stuck in it from this point forward, right? So at one point he says, basically children are shaped and informed. And I'm like, no, you mean formed. Surely that's what you mean. Informed is some magical conveyance of knowledge through propositions, at least as people are using it nowadays. But he made that mistake, as though, this is being done to you. Like, you're being informed. See how it's very two object. It's very dualistic. And it's like, no. Nobody can inform me. That's not possible. I have to agree to it. And I think this is what individuals always miss, because in individualism, you end up needing the outside world to help you, because you've separated yourself from it. So you kind of created a problem that didn't exist and doesn't have to exist. And then all of a sudden you have all these issues that can only be resolved through the other thing that's not you doing something to you. When in fact it's odd, right? Because actually that framework would say nothing can do anything to you. You have to agree, which is the correct answer. But then the framing's wrong. It just cracks me up that you get stuck in these little loops pretty easily. But Peterson does a very good job of kind of getting stuck in those groups. And I think it's worth asking how parents want children's approval, even if they are neglectful of them, right? Which Peterson doesn't see the contradiction there, right? And indeed, this seems like a self-reference problem from a second generation of the same issue, right? Not just some new thing that started with the current round of parents. This is what I was pointing to earlier. This is a clear indication that the Rousseauian, fine in nature problem is conveyed by parents who were born in it, and now it looks different. And you could say, well, that doesn't make any sense, but of course it does. But also think about the grandparents. So the grandparents who neglected their children still were brought up in it, and that rubs off on their grandchildren. And it might also rub off on the parents, because propositionally, in other words, in their fantasy mind, they are trying to, let not form the child effectively, but they're failing badly because exemplification, mimicry rules the roost. Someday I'll do videos on that. It's going to be hard to do. No one wants to believe that, so it's going to be a mess. Terrible idea. This whole channel is stupid. No one wants to hear this stuff. It's painful. And there's some exposure, right? But then it's so weak that when there are kids who have been brought up kind of that way, but not really, or they're convinced that's how they've been brought up. You were brought up free range. It's like, no, I wasn't. That's why there's such a thing as Gen X wisdom, and they need to pass it on because the parents didn't. So, right, the millennial parents and the Gen whatever comes after millennial and whatnot, they didn't pass this stuff on. So now you need the Gen Xers who still have it to pass it on, right? So I don't think Peterson accounts for that. Again, he's 1 or 2 generations off on his blame chain here. And fair enough, in psychological terms, you can only deal with individualistic instances. You can't think about the impact of things like mimicry and, we'll say, the non-psychological or non-materialistic stuff. Did you want to jump in here before I continue with my line 22 of my file?
Oh my goodness. See, something I've been doing to kind of soothe myself is, as we go through my notes, I cut them down so it looks like it's a lot less than it was, and that's a little bit calming. But I thought it was interesting. He goes and he kicks off this portion of the book talking about like intertribal warfare of chimps, and which was quite a bit of a little bit of a slog there. But
yeah,
and then he makes the statement of, then jumping straight over to humans, says, the human capacity for self-control is something to the effect of it being like wildly overestimated. And it's interesting because you have that thing of like the ideal of the noble savage, or you have, like the perfect in the natural state sort of thing, and then talking about how hunter-gatherers are generally considered much more murderous than everybody else. And it's just like, you have, or even wasn't it Jane Goodall, I think, that he references that she was like horrified by her findings, and it's just like, oh yeah, like there's an interesting sort of thing going on here with these people who are sort of roaming bands, whether you're talking about a different species of animal that does this type of behavior versus humans. I don't like the sort of juxtaposition of them super, super close together, but there is something interesting there where, like, I've made the example before of, you take like dogs in captivity that were observed, and then they kind of look at them as dominance hierarchies. And it's just like, well, okay, that's because you put these dogs in a prison environment. And so what you got were prison gangs, not an actual dog pack, And so,
right.
So if you wind up changing the container that these things are in and the type of care that's being provided, then okay. If you wind up reducing humans to animal conditions, or animals to like sub-animal conditions, then you're going to wind up getting some really, really rough behaviors coming out of there.
Can always point down.
Yeah, it's very, very easy. And he talks about the
dangers always
of
point up. You can't always point up, but you can always point down.
Yeah. Because you can't always necessarily know if you're even looking up. I mean, especially if you're far enough down. And he talks about this, like the dangers of having a relationship with someone who is poorly socialized.
Yeah.
And so you have this sort of thing where now you've got this reciprocal narrowing where it's going to be, bad behaviors, and then having to put on additional restrictions as a result of the bad behaviors. And it's just going to kind of keep on getting worse. So more negative contrast again. But I thought it was sort of important to mention that, because then you can contrast that sort of implicitly, unfortunately, that if you have the structure, if you get to things early and often and provide the formation without over constraining, and thankfully he talks about that later with not putting too many rules and that sort of thing, that you can actually wind up fostering a positive environment. And I think, we touched on that a bit before, but he just spent a lot of time on this, so I wanted to mention that for the folks at home.
Yeah, he did. And also, like, it's worth like taking very seriously. Jane Goodall saw this behavior and didn't publish her notes on it for years.
Mm-hmm.
So scientists are sneaky bastards who manipulate you, just so you know. It's not, his worship of knowledge and experts is not all it's cracked up to be, because they do their own personal biases, will hide information that they actually have that is super important, for whatever reason. Like, I'm a pragmatist. I can't know your reasons, and so I don't care about your reasons because I can't know them, and too bad. But he does make an interesting point I think it's at the end of that, actually. Peace is a mystery. Violence is a natural state, right? I mean, his postmodern definition of power shows, but the idea is sound enough, right? Train your kids not to be violent. You must form them in the ability to tame violence and use it wisely. He's missing that part, rather than their, using it for their own personal whim. And that would be hedonism, by the way, which is, I guess hedonism. what's the theme for this chapter? Mark, hedonism. That's what the theme is, because children are little hedonists. So it kind of makes sense. And again, I think this is a great example of Peterson moving your attention such that you are able to give yourself some formation that you should have gotten from your parents and didn't. Because when I read all this stuff, I'm always like, why is this written down? Like, who is the audience here? Are you telling me there are people that don't understand all of these things already? And then I have to weep for all of humanity. That in fact, the fact that the book is so popular means that people don't know this stuff.
Mhm.
And like, fair enough. Like, and we'll get to my pal V.F. Skinner soon enough. Um, yeah, we could do 4 hours on that jerk. And all his recalcitrant, reprehensible followers. Peace is the mystery. Civilization is the thing that brings the peace. And he does kind of talk about that, right? Like, oh, to be civilized is to lower the violence. Why are you lowering the violence? Because you're forming your inhabitants in when it's appropriate to be used and when it isn't, and how much in each circumstance, which is something he sort of touches on. And you know, in fact, that's how I part of my definition of maturity. See my videos. That'll be another theme. Watch my maturity videos if you like this stuff, because this is all in there. Which, by the way, again, yes, I have read the book before, but I did the reading of Today for Today, and the maturity videos predate that. And you can always say, oh, well, this is sort of very background and, whatever. I think the zeitgeist is at play here, or that egregore or Ed Gregor, if you prefer, which of course you should, because Ed Gregor is awesome. And then he talks about this idea of no grudge after a victory, especially when dealing with children. But of course, that applies everywhere. Like, don't hold a grudge. Like, take the win. Take the win, right? Drag the losers with you into your win. Everybody will be better off. Being arrogant about it, or stamping it out, or saying like, ha ha, I won, is not dragging people with you in the win. And people like a winner who drags them with them, obviously. They don't like a winner who stamps on them. Weird that. It's tell you a random coincidence there, Castle. Did you have anything before I try to continue to my 23rd note, line 25 in my file?
So I do have a couple of little things here. So one, just I thought, even though it is kind of an obvious point, just the being considerate of the amount of time and resources required in providing for a dependent, and this this also kind of ties into like the kid that Tammy was nice to. It's like, well, now he's following you everywhere. And also, especially because she took on this dependent for a day, there's also that sort of pain of separation that he describes, of now, like, they never have the kid over again. And so there is a certain difficulty that comes along with that. And then he talks about this thing of tolerating momentary anger or hatred from those that you've corrected.
Mm-hmm.
And I was thinking of this thing of, like, the equal and opposite reaction trope, where it's like, okay, I had to push against you to make a correction. And also, yes, you're probably going to hate me for it for a little bit, and it's like recognizing that cost in having a dependent, in a certain sense, like by correcting someone on something that they needed to be corrected on, you've almost kind of taken on responsibility for them. But now it isn't done now that you've just had the interaction. Like, now you have that connection where now it's potentially negative towards you, or at least maybe they're just reeling from the pain of the truth that you gave them or something like that. So it's sort of the cost of doing good, but that doesn't mean that you shouldn't still do it.
Right, because it's people are honing in on the cost,
Right.
and they're projecting that cost on the other person. Oh, I'll hurt the other person's feelings. Well, aren't you a magnanimous, arrogant piece of garbage? Is that what you care about? No, I think you care about them. I think you care about your reputation. I think that's what you care about when you say that, right? Because I've been corrected a number of times. Like, there's been a few times. There's been 2 times in particular that I will always remember for some reason, where my boss is like, you did this, right? But you could do these things because you can do that, right? And the implication, for whatever reason, came across very strongly. These other idiots in the group can't do that, but you actually could. And it was not like I didn't do something wrong. I absolutely did, which is why I was getting corrected. But he was like in one instance, it was that we were at a bank. And financial institutions are the most political, in the US political sense, machines that exist on the planet. Everybody there is a VP or an assistant vice president, and they're all underpaid, right? Because they have title. That's the trick of the financial institutions. They give you a title and no money. That's what they do. Insurance companies, banks, all this stuff, investment firms, right? That, whatever. And that way, the people at the top take all the money, and they already have the title. They don't care, right? They'll have that title forever anyway. So you go to a bank and there's 1,000 AVPs and 500 presidents, and everyone's got, director of this and whatever below them. And just it's the most ridiculous corporate structure of all time. And so they're very highly political places. So my boss pulls me aside and he goes, "You handled this badly. But the thing is, you could play these politics. Like, it doesn't cost you anything, right? Like, you still have to interact with these people and get upset. So that's already happened." I know it hasn't, the particular instance hasn't occurred yet, right? But it's coming. Right? Every time you take a ticket and go to someone's desk, you're going to get upset about something somewhere. It might not be that person, right? It might be some idiot who touched the machine before you, or some setup that corporate handed down, 5 years ago and has never changed, or whatever. It could be anything, right? It could be the phase of the moon. Who knows? But you're going to get upset at something, but you have the capacity to handle it. So why don't you just handle it better, dumbass? And so that's very useful. It's a useful way to understand that, rather than being like, well, I, in my magnanimity, don't want to hurt that other person because I'm so much better than them that I could just crush them. It's like, that's not what's going on there at all. But I hear your arrogance loud and clear. Thank you very much.
And I think that anecdote as well goes really well into a point that he makes here, where he says, he talks about the rarity of creativity, and then that structure and constraints facilitate it when it is present. And I think that's exactly on display in that story, where you have an importance of imposing constraints. There's maybe someone who has a capacity for a certain level of creativity in a given area, and then you have to, there's actually more expression of that creativity when you put more focus on it. And he did this, I think, in his old, his classroom lectures, where he would say, "Oh, if I just came to you and say, hey, just make art." It's just make something. Yeah. And it's just like, no, that's not going to work. Like, you have to be more specific. And actually, sometimes, to a certain degree, the more specific you are, the easier it is to facilitate that thing. Give me a good idea what you want. And then now there's a whole bunch of opportunities for me to actually express something and make something unique. But otherwise, it's just like, well, I'm going to probably go for something really easy. If you just say, hey, make something, I'm not going to do something impressive. I'm just going to make something, and it's going to be pretty boring or maybe bad. So just that. And then I like the point about no grudge after victory. That thing, I think there's some points that he makes a little bit later about use of force, but I think, there is something really valuable there about knowing also, if you wind up having some sort of, disagreement or competition with someone, that's also someone that would, even if you do wind up winning, that's someone that would be really good for supporting or maybe even covering things that you're not capable of covering because you're one human being. I've used that example in the past, and there's that one guy that was an extremely high level, talented historian and writer and orator. And there was a guy who was his rival, that he wasn't rivalrous with this guy, but that guy was super rivalrous with him. And the guy, out of spite, wound up going into a completely different career because he wanted to be the best at something. So he was willing to give up the thing that he himself was best at because he wasn't better than the other guy, even though the other guy was older and eventually wound up having a stroke and could have really used the second man to help him out. And that guy would have taken he would have taken the spotlight and he would have been able to be seen as a good guy. And then it's just like he wound up going in infamy to a job he was worse at, and then actually only has negative, like a memory that's negative attached to him.
Walter White syndrome.
Yeah. Yeah.
The anger and the resentment is right there. And then Peterson makes what I think is perhaps the best point of the whole book, in my personal opinion, which is that Elmo is a creepy, whiny puppet. So yes, in fact, this is the greatest insight of all time. That is as true as a statement can be. I am a big fan of that creepy, whiny puppet.
Gonna have to get the Elmo gang to rise up, and we'll do some tribal Muppet warfare.
Yeah. But he talks about not talking to parents about their children, right, until they are ready to listen. But really, again, this applies to all things with all people of all ages, right? But it's a good way to filter, right? If you can filter for people who are ready to listen, that might be sufficient. It won't produce awesome results, but that's what the sort of thing you should filter on, right? Is, are people ready to listen? And there's easy ways to do that. So, for example, one thing you could do is you could have a Discord server. And if people aren't even willing to join the Discord server, well, I don't know. I mean, I'll talk to them on YouTube in this wacky one-way sort of tyrannical thing that they all whine about tyranny and they join the biggest tyranny on the planet, which is YouTube, which cracks me up. Don't tell them though. They wouldn't believe you anyway. You know why? They're not ready to listen. Not ready to listen. CC Mool, good to see you, CC. Cookie Monster or bust. Whatever. Just as long as it's not creepy, whiny Elmo. I think I'm fine with any other Muppets. But have you considered? And have you considered which one? Like, which one are you? Hopefully you're not Beaker. Me. Let's do the book club as Beaker once.
Oh no.
Completely awesome.
Next week, because the reading's 4 hours, we could just do this.
Oh my God. If the reading's 4 hours, we're just going to do Beaker Muppet instead. Yeah. So again, I mean, this is another case where he's giving good generalized life advice that helps you to mature. And I think that's why Papa Peterson is a thing, even though in my video on Papa Peterson, I'm going to eviscerate that idea pretty thoroughly. I mean, not the idea, but the use of the term, because it is fundamentally a problem. So he does sort of mention that things that look the same don't always sound the same. And I would expand that out or have some other quality in common, right? And that's discernment. So, a lot of people will look at Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos and say, they came from nothing, and which is a lie, by the way, and then made billions of dollars. And that's only true of Elon, by the way. Bezos is still just, they're never making back the $1 trillion they've invested in Amazon. It's never going to happen. It's never going to happen. This is going to take another 50 years. So they're not the same, right? I mean, they have this similar amounts of money or something, but they're not the same. They're moving society, but through very different means and to very different aims, by the way. Just read Bezos's letters from his early days. Like, he's not a good guy and he doesn't have a good plan and he's a terrible human being. Elon, I don't think so. I mean, he might be a crazy autist, but at least he's not a terrible person. And then, in that's that story about the kid with the Elmo, right? That's where this is. And then he chooses not to tell the father, which I found very interesting, right? Because in a way, the father did open the door to being told something about how his son actually just went to sleep. And Peterson sort of is like, well, everybody picks their poison. And I'm like, boy, that's a very Mark-like thing to say, but I'm not sure I would say it in that. I'm not sure I would cop to that one. I don't mind justice for people I interact with, but justice when the failure is mine, I'm okay with that because I'm fine with being punished for my mistakes. No problem with that. But yeah, it wouldn't work out well for Peterson because he kind of poisoned himself by not taking the opportunity to explain that. So before we
Mm.
get into my favorite psychologist of all time, B.F. Skinner, do you have anything to catch up with from your notes?
So I'm not 100% certain if we've gone beyond the point where I have these notes.
Yeah, it's not that
So
formal. It's fine.
yeah, yeah. So I think just, you talked about general life advice. I just want to kind of point to the when you're guiding and teaching people to do so incrementally and then reward anything approximating what you wanted to see. So if there is in fact something that you're capable of teaching someone else of, or if it's something that, again, not letting people do things that make you dislike them, or if someone does something that
Yeah.
you do like, to reward that in some way. And he mentions, paying attention can be a reward.
Yeah,
Especially
yeah.
certain people very much want that. So just kind of showing, I
It's
mean,
the
if
best reward.
anything, yeah, like that's the thing, is that if you're actually trying to have any kind of relationship with someone and not just kind of like, okay, well, I'm never going to see this guy again because he just delivered my mail or something and he's got to go to the next house, then you probably should be paying attention to that person.
Yeah,
That might actually help them kind of be a little bit more invested in not doing things that make you dislike them. If you're
yeah,
actually paying attention to them, that might
exactly.
actually. He even mentions before this the thing of people being more concerned about a particular loss versus
Yep,
attaining an equivalent gain, and that
yep,
can be used within the frame of attention. That it's like, well, if you're
yep.
receiving attention from this person and then you're doing something that's making them want to not give you attention anymore, then that might be a decent enough signal for you to stop doing the thing. You know,
Yeah, and that's a thread throughout here is this procedural approach, which I'll get into later for sure, to doing this. But real quick, Castle pop quiz. What are the three most valuable things that you have after all?
uh, according to you, time and energy and attention.
What do you mean
Uh,
according to me? According to the universe. I didn't make that up.
uh,
But sure, we can pretend there's some other answer somewhere.
yeah,
It will be wrong, however, and that's provably true. But yes, time, energy, and attention. So, are we good? Can I
yeah,
rant about B.F. Skinner?
yeah,
Excellent,
yeah. Go for it.
excellent. And again, guys, if you've got questions or comments or whatever, hopefully you're following along. You have your own notes. um, but for those of you who don't, he mentions B.F. Skinner. B.F. Skinner is a problem, not a solution. Okay. All this nice discernment about reward is true, but unhelpful. Peterson goes into this like, well, you can size the rewards to the event. It's like, no, you can't. That presumes objective material reality, which does not exist. Right? There's no such place. There's no such capability. Um, Reward sizes vary per person and per task. And because different tasks are differently difficult to persons, right? That's three problems in calculating rewards. This procedural approach is entirely unhelpful. Proceduralizing behavior modification is likely not a great idea, but it's not needed. Like, this is an unnecessary way to deal with this. So, just to give you a little contrast as to why B.F. Skinner's an issue rather than, you know, a hero or something, or a protagonist. B.F. Skinner has a lot of great work on behavior. All of it is scientific in nature. And while B.F. Skinner himself took care, and Peterson goes into some of this, took care and did the right thing with respect to behavior modification by setting the right frame for the animals he was training. It's still science, it's still proceduralized, and it's still wrong. Not that it's unuseful, right? Most science is useful, most, not all, in a certain context. But B.F. Skinner is very good at paying attention to context, and the people that have followed on from him are not. His main mistake was his whole Walden idea, which is based on a paper where he somehow forgets that context is ruling the roost And he sort of indicates in the paper that you can do a positive reinforcement only society with human beings. It doesn't even work with animals, by the way. I don't know why people think it does. It's just, I guess if you filter all the bad stuff, everything is great. Which is a common theme nowadays. I'm just going to ignore all the bad things that happened. It was great. Communism was awesome. So I think that Skinner writes this paper. Skinner tries to get it to work. His experiment fails. He tries again and it fails. His son tries it. It's called Walden 2. It fails. And it's interesting that he brings up Skinner, and actually most of Skinner's work is great, to be fair, like absolutely. But he's so wrong about this one thing and then everybody likes it. So we're in the age of hippie Jesus, where Spirit in the Sky is the anthem for the hippie Jesus people. Guess what song I heard in a mix the other day? And then had a realization about B.F. Skinner, because Peterson talks about it, but then doesn't. B.F. Skinner was wrong about these things, and here's context, and he did context correctly, and everybody else didn't, and then he lost his mind and went on this positive reinforcement only nonsense and failed to be able to prove his own thesis because it's that wrong. It's so wrong that you couldn't set up a controlled scientific experiment to show that it worked. That's pretty wrong. That's the proper way to use science right there. If you can't set up a controlled experiment to prove something about what you're saying is correct, then you are completely and utterly wrong about that thing. And B.F. Skinner definitely falls into that category. But Peterson goes on to talk about pain and hope, right? Pain is more potent than pleasure, and anxiety is more potent than hope. And I think the problem is that he's talking about things with no overlap. I don't know what he's talking about with anxiety. I don't know what his definition is, but I know it's wrong. So that's pretty easy. And I will have an anxiety course coming, but fortunately I ran out of AI credits to have the AI format some stuff for me. So I have to wait till tomorrow. But I did find some stuff. So I was rather pleased with myself about that. Also, don't read the book, take notes on the book while doing that project and 2 others, because it will take you longer. Unless you're me, in which case you can get away with it, but I shouldn't do it either. So yeah, I think there's a poor materialist definition of hope as well. And yeah, they play fast and loose with the word pleasure as well. And I don't know what potent means in that sentence, actually. No, I mean, I think what he's getting, I mean, the problem is what he's getting at is correct, right? There's a driver, an influence that is greater on the negative side of the register than the positive side of the register. Absolutely true. It has to be true for evolution. All of evolutionary theory set would collapse if that weren't the case. All of it, instantly. There's no part of the evolutionist thesis, bad ideas, hypothesis, and terrible inference that is correct if negative isn't more important than positive. It has to be. Otherwise, that whole thing breaks down. And I think evolution is true and correct. I'm not buying into like the Brett Weinsteins of the world, inference-based and extra theory-based bullshit, because it's clearly wrong, observably so. But like I don't deny evolution in any way, shape, or form. I think that's silly. Castle, anything before I move on?
Yeah, I think well, just to immediately comment on that, I mean the word even means like unfolding. So it's just like, yeah, like if you're denying the concept of things unfolding, then that would be kind of insane. That means that you haven't had any experience with really anything in the world. But it is kind of interesting how it winds up, you wind up falling into a lot of these issues where people start tacking on additionally. It's kind of like when you get like congressmen present a bill and they say that it's about something, and then everyone and their dog starts adding a whole bunch of other stuff that they want to also be correct to just kind of ride the train. But yeah, so I think it is interesting. You have the whole thing about of course the negative signal being the most important one, that kind of being the thing that helps you avoid damage. You experience it in abstraction maybe, or interior microcosm, you might say, instead of experiencing it more catastrophically. And then yeah, I think that's probably, I don't know, have we gotten to Maleficent yet? I don't know if we have.
I don't think we're quite there yet. I think it's a little further down.
Okay, that's all I got for now.
Okay. So he's got this idea of formation, right? Which I would call a good justification for formation. Of course, he's not using that term for reasons which remain a complete mystery to me. I have to care for you, so you have to do what I say. But I think that's totally backwards, right? To care for somebody is to form them, right? To ignore somebody, right? Not to be mean to them, but to ignore them is the worst crime. This is sort of well promulgated over the internet and other places, right? Otherwise, you just don't care, right? You're just using them when convenient, right? So if your interaction with somebody isn't forming them, you're just using them when it's convenient for you. They become objects, or instruments or tools of the world for you to wield. If you're caring for somebody, you're impacting them negatively, in order to make them better, and hopefully carefully. Although maybe you're bad at that. So fair enough. Maybe you're not bad at that, but people think you are. That's even worse. Yeah, all my aunts. All my aunts. Oh, when we were kids, this happened to us and that happened to us, and in front of their mother, by the way. And my grandmother and I sitting at the table going, I don't know. This is a pretty nice house. You live in a pretty expensive neighborhood. You have like 4 cars and there's only 2 of you. You have 3 beautiful boys. I don't know. I'm not and a beach house on the water in Maine. I don't know. I don't know. Was it that bad? Was your childhood that bad? Because it doesn't seem it seems like my grandmother would say that. I don't know. It seems like it turned out okay. And they're bitching in the other room. We can hear them. Like they're not being quiet. The fevers aren't quiet. Uh, as you may have guessed. Um, it was weird, right? It's like, are you sure that the harshness that you felt was harshness and not pure unadulterated love that benefited you greatly to an extent which you could not have imagined? And quite honestly, neither can I, because none of you deserve the awesome stuff you have. Different problem. Uh, anyway, yeah, like there is a justification for formation in the chapter, right? And it is that, but he's just got carrying backwards. He's got it. I don't know. His individualistic perspective, it just kills some of his good work. But people still extract good out of it, right? I mean, this is a great book.
Mm.
And there's lots of extremist dualism in here, like comply gracefully versus crushed into mindless ideological conformity. And I was like, what? Like, why are those the 2 options? I don't get. And to be fair, he's trying to give you that third way. That's all I like to call it, the third way. But for me, it kind of falls short. And I like that this is the part where he goes into by 4 children are formed. And if the world always meets them with pushback, then they predict they will grow angry and resentful. Right? Indeed. And I think that's the mystery solved right there, is why are these people like that? And the reason why people get angry and resentful is because the world is not meeting them, to their specifications. Right. And that's what's making them angry. And if you are clever enough and take good notes, taking notes is a superpower. Did you know that? There's a video about that somewhere. I think it's probably that Navigating Patterns channel again. It's a great video. But if you are careful with the chapter, you'll notice that actually that theme is in the chapter. Peterson doesn't seem to have intended it, or if he did, I wish he had made it a lot more clear that the thing that causes anger, resentment is the mismatch between your expectations of the world and what the world is delivering to you. And man, when you start viewing things that way, the world makes a lot more sense, my friend. It makes a lot more sense. I'm just going to tell you right now. So, yeah. And then I think this is where Maleficent comes in. He's sort of talking about hierarchies based on power. And I'm like, the better way to talk about that is hierarchies are not based on power, but if you act like they are, you'll end up in a bad place. Because again, your expectation of the world won't match at all. You'll become angry and resentful when obtaining what you thought was power and that not producing the expected result. And that, that works fractally. So you could say, all right, we all got together and we got this person elected, and none of the changes that we thought they were going to make, they actually made. And so the anger and resentment is blaming the other political party. And it's like, are you sure that's how that works? And there's only two options. And it couldn't be that they lied to you all along to get your vote or anything. And then they enacted exactly the laws they wanted to. And that's not a possibility, huh? But I think that, yeah, I can see why people are angry and resentful. And I can see why the low IQ crowd is like, oh, there must have been cheating in the election or whatever, right? It's like, yeah, but that was our claim last week, and now it's your claim this week, and it's okay. It's like, wait a minute, right? And that happens all the time in all kinds of arenas too, right? And political is just the most clear, right? You're not a political agent entity, or unless you're running for office, so pay attention to something else. Vote wisely, but meet the people you're voting for. So I know I'm voting for governor now because I met the lieutenant governor and she's running. So there you go.
Nice.
Problem solved.
There you go.
Takes 2 seconds. Smart woman. Sharp as a tack. Oh yeah. Excellent. What you got?
So the thing I'm just sort of thinking about, and it is interesting, this connection with the anxiety and like the sort of mismatch of the fantasy that you have versus what is actually real in front of you, or maybe even like, you might call the fantasy like the lies you've been telling yourself based on what you would like to be the case as opposed to what's actually there, and what's actually possible. And you see this sometimes, like you encounter people that, they ask a lot of why questions, but not clarifying questions, but almost like an accusation. And I see this sometimes, like this is something like I get I understand the desire to behave this way, but also it feels so contrary to my nature to work with people that behave that way, because and of course, like it does kind of go both ways, where it's just like, yeah, I get the impulse to behave this way, but it's also one of the things that makes me not want to ever behave that way is because I know what it's like on the other side, and you see people that are like, oh, why did this happen? Why did this other person do this thing? It's like, one, you're also incorrect about what you just accused them of doing. And like, and a lot of times what I'll wind up doing when this happens, because this happened as recently as this past week, is I will present you screenshots of exactly what happened, and then it's just like silence, and it's just like, you could have avoided the discomfort even of me doing that. Like I if it was something, for me or whatever, it's just like, okay, this is a minor thing, but it's like if you're accusing other people, like why, now the impulse starts coming back, like I'm going to turn into a hall of mirrors for you. Like I'm going to start asking you why questions like crazy, and it's not going to be good. No. And I think coming up, we've got the thing about minimum necessary force. And I think it's really easy to wind up sort of sparking escalation by leaning too far into these fantasies that we
Yeah.
have of, like, oh, I wish that it was like this, or, oh, why can't it be this in a way? Sometimes I'll joke around asking, like, stupid questions, like, oh, like, I don't understand why I can't just, like, lie around eating grapes while everyone just kind of handles my every whim. And it's just like, yeah, of course, you can just reduce it down to, yes, this is really stupid to be in that mode of thinking. Um,
I do that too. Like
yeah, yeah,
if there's anything I suffer from, it's, oh, you're gonna push me, huh?
yeah.
Well, I'm hyper competent. So if you're gonna push me to do something, I'm gonna do it really, really well, and you're gonna suffer the consequences of that. Because at that point, I'm like, well, I'm gonna give you what you asked for. It's not gonna be what you expected though. So hold on
Yeah.
tight. And maybe I go too far with that occasionally, but also I don't care. So
Yeah. I think that's the danger. It's just like it winds up opening the occasion of now everybody's misbehaving, where
yeah, well,
it's
I don't think so. I mean, usually if you embarrass somebody with their own stupidity, everybody
mm,
calms down immediately.
true.
That's been my experience.
Yeah. Well, I'm also saying that
Even if it's from a peer, right?
yeah.
It doesn't have to be from the boss. Yeah.
I'm also saying, like, the person who started asking the why questions, like, that person just invited mischief from everybody else, and maybe
Yeah.
that will wind up resolving the situation, but it's not
We
going to be
mimic.
comfortable.
Well, but also they've perpetuated the problem. So they had a
Mhm.
misapprehension. And then their response, I don't know what their apprehension was. I'm not
Yeah.
in their head,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
So their response causes what looks like the same thing, but it's not the same thing. It's actually the
Mhm.
exact polar opposite for real.
Yeah.
Right? No. They had a misapprehension and they're responding to a misapprehension, a fantasy. Whereas
Mhm.
what you're responding to is their fantasy.
Yeah.
They were responding to your reality, right? To what you did and saying,
Mhm.
well, this doesn't match what I expected. It's like, it's totally backwards. It's like, wow. So yeah, that
Yeah.
has a tendency to cascade. Why? Because we mimic.
Mhm.
Right. And so it's sort of like used to see this a lot in hockey. I don't know how much I've watched hockey in a while, but you have one of these really rivalrous team things going on, and then it's that first punch. And you're like, if no one throws a punch, because that can happen in hockey, it's possible to go to a hockey game and a fight doesn't break out. I've seen it. I know it's rare, but um if no one throws a punch, or no one throws a punch until the last 4 minutes, because that's actually super common. If no one throws a punch in the beginning of the game, up to, let's say, the late middle of the game, then we're fine. But if someone throws a punch, there's going to be 4 fights throughout the game. And then that indicator was super reliable with a bunch of teams for years and years and years. And that's because of the mimicry, right? Like once a behavior is made acceptable, right? This is why it's important to, like, if you're going to set a red line, you better hold to that red line, right?
Mhm.
If you're going to draw a line in the sand, you got to hold it, right? If you're going to say there's going to be consequences, you better meet them out. Because if you don't, if you say lock her up and you don't lock her up, it's not good. Like things will get worse later. Just random hypothetical examples. Anyway, anything else before we try to round this out? If that's
I
even
think
possible.
I don't know. Do you want to do you want to dive into that not inviting Maleficent to the christening of the baby? I don't think it's appropriate to invite everyone and their dog to be around your children. I mean, I get that he's kind of analogizing it to,
Oh,
like,
I
the
I
helicopter parenting.
I skipped over all that in my notes because I was like, yeah, boring. Um, so this is great. Yeah. So yeah, I think the message that Peterson's missing there is that there's a way to invite Maleficent and contain her
Mhm.
so that none of this happens. And he likes the first part and not the second part. And so he doesn't talk about the second part. In the same way, as I pointed out earlier, he doesn't talk about, well, the men have to help regulate the women and the children
Mhm.
with their manliness. That's what manliness is, by the way. Different video. You want to see that video? Comment below. Like he just doesn't talk about that. Like he's not talking about the responsibilities of the hierarchy, right? Because he's coming from an individualist perspective. He's always talking about the impositions of things. And to be fair, he is reinvigorating the utility of those impositions. That's correct, right? Like, yes, the king is going to tell you what to do. And yes, sometimes it's going to suck and sometimes it's going to be wrong. But if you do it most of the time, you'll get the gold. Like, that's correct. Sorry, submission is good. Like, I don't know what to tell you. You don't have a choice. You're already born into this world. I don't. Why are we arguing about this still? Why does anybody have to write or talk about this ever? I don't understand. This is all within the realm of your personal experience, and you seem to have rejected your past and ignored reality flying around you constantly. So I think that for me is what he's missing. He misses that in his interpretation of Cain and Abel too, which, you know, I don't know. I don't think there's a solution to that problem. It's interesting that the apologists aren't trying to help him fix that either, which well, you're an apologist, huh? That's great. Great work. Thanks. Yeah, what did you have? What else did you have? Does that clear it up or did I make it worse?
Yeah, I mean, I just it is interesting, to just kind of focus on that, where it's just like, oh, he's proposing that the proper response was to invite Maleficent so that she wouldn't curse the kid and basically promise death of this royal family's child. And that their response is, oh, we're going to remove all of the, possible things that could poke her finger or whatever. But it's like, okay, well, you know that she's evil and she just promised death to your child. Like, why
are you not? But she's not evil, and they don't know that up front. And this is a classic inversion in storytelling. Had they tried to control the situation up front and invited her with a control in place, because apparently they have the power to banish all the spinning wheels from the kingdom.
Right.
They have quite a bit of control over their kingdom. This wouldn't have happened. But again, Peterson doesn't talk about proper enforcement of control on systems. He just talks about postmodern power narrative garbage. They don't even have a definition of power. I do, though. See navigating patterns. That's what bothers me. It's like, bro, you don't even have a definition of power. And I don't mean you haven't written one down. I'm telling you right now, he ain't got one. I could ask him and he wouldn't be able to pull it off. Guaranteed. Right? Because postmoderns think of power as just control through force or threat of force. That's it. That's the as close as they get to a definition of power. It's terrible. It's completely wrong. Your power is your focus, time, energy, and attention. Power at all levels is focus, time, energy, and attention, right? The reason why they won't touch with 10-foot poles because of charisma. Sure. And then I want to admit that charisma is the best focuser of other people's time, energy, and attention that exists. It's kind of definitional, but they don't want to touch it because deep down inside, academics still believe that the problem of the 20th century was evil dictators and not bad systems. They still don't want to indict systems because there's experts in, well, they think they're experts in systems. They're not. I call it complexity theory is a mess. They think they're experts in systems. And so, and they are the irony is, and this is my contention, I'm not going to back it up with a bunch of research, but it is based on research I've done. My contention is that precisely those evil dictators knew full well that the age of gnosis was here and that the intellectual class had an outsized sway, and they used them like the little sheeple they are to do what they did, like rather explicitly. And someday that video will come out, but I think we're months away, but maybe only months. Although then again, we could only be a week away because if one particular thing breaks out in the zeitgeist, then bang, there's 3 or 4 videos about that time period coming out for sure. Because boy, do I got things to tell you about that, and you ain't gonna like none of them. Yeah, so I think that's what's going on there. Is that he still doesn't understand hierarchy. He never talks about it other than to point to it, right? And to be fair, again, it's a great first step. Hierarchy is older than trees. What are we going to do? Good. We can do without hierarchy. Everyone can be an anarchist. It was a bad message. It's worked very badly for us. since the beginning. That message, by the way, well, anarchy caused the Great War. Bang. There we go. Okay. That's myth. All the myth of World War II stuff is now out. And as far as I'm concerned, you can piece it all together now if you want. Between the history videos with Adam and the videos I've already done and that little tidbit, boom, the whole thing is there. You can derive the rest if you're good enough. And you probably aren't, so fair enough. But still, I'm gonna be thrilled with myself forever now. Yeah, those charisma piece and that piece is super important to that message. Does that clear it up, Castle? Because the story is just inverted, but if you invert what happened, actually it fixes what Peterson's talking about. Peterson doesn't know that. That's all.
Yeah. No, yeah, it makes sense. I guess just in my barbarian brain, I'm just thinking like, which in forest cursed child, you have power to gather all the sharp things. Why not
squish time.
Handle? Yeah.
We squish time and we go, see what she did in the future? She shouldn't have been invited because she was evil. Mm-hmm. And the thing is, that's not necessarily wrong, but it's wrong in the story because there's no evidence that she's evil aside from the name. Right. So if we knew she was evil and she was so evil she couldn't be controlled by the king, then she shouldn't be invited. That's a lot of open conditionals. That's just a lot of open conditionals because the story indicates the king was plenty strong enough to contain her. And he just didn't. He got lazy. He said, you know what? He's kind of trouble. Instead of trying to mitigate the trouble or accept the trouble, because sometimes you have to accept trouble. There's people on my Discord server that I'm often like, is this really worth it, Mark? And I'm just like, deep breaths, Mark. Wim Hof. So, there's a bunch of stuff I have to do daily that I'm just like, this is a lot of work. I wasn't like this before. And I just feel like, but now you have to struggle through it because life is struggle, and he does go into that eventually too. Life is, he doesn't use the right term. He uses suffering, but he means struggle. So because they're dualists, there's no middle way for these clowns. There's nothing in the middle. Life is hedonism or suffering. It's really, really so much bigger than that. So does that kind of clear it up?
Yeah, no, it makes sense. I mean, just the lesson I'm coming away with is just destroy the witch. I think that's the lesson I'm going with.
No. Control the woman before she turns into a witch.
Okay, yes, fair enough. It's been a long time since I've actually had exposure to the actual story. So to your point about squishing things down, all I've got is just woman, curse, child, handle this. And
right.
There's a lot of stuff before that exact point that I actually just probably wasn't paying attention.
And it doesn't matter what's in before, because the framing of the story is such to tell you that these very powerful people who had the power to make this not happen decided for whatever reason not to do that. That's part of the morals, because there's fairy tales don't have one moral. That's dumb. The morals of the story is that the king and queen made a mistake. They didn't make the precise mistake that Peterson's talking about because he wasn't precise enough about. They had enough control that they could have contained it, and they could have shown enough grace that even if it didn't go well, that bad result would have been less bad than the bad result we got. And, instead there's a redemption arc that has to happen. And the redemption, so, people are always like sins of the father. Well, there's sins of the father right there. The daughter suffers for the father's bad decision and needs to be redeemed, right? It's, sure. That's, save your father from the belly of the whale.
And she becomes from what I remember in the story, like she's sort of incapacitated, I guess, by the fact that she's been so excessively sheltered. But it's like now she has no exposure to anything that expresses a point. Essentially, like she's not
exactly.
So she's put in danger, and it's just like, okay, well, Like, yeah, she's not being strengthened by people who are themselves strong, who are deciding not
Exactly.
to do it, and they're even after they find out that their daughter has been cursed, they're still not containing the witch, and they're not
Yeah,
doing anything to
that's
strengthen
right.
the kid. And
That's
it's
right.
like they're not increasing defenses, they're actually getting rid of everything that's sharp.
And they're
You know?
using their power, their
Mhm.
strength, their capability,
Yeah.
their hierarchical status to weaken the child in an effort to protect.
Hmm.
And if you wanted to see the world as self-similarly fractal at this point, you could recognize, uh, yes, they remove all points from her life. If you are removing points from your life, then you are rejecting telos as such. And we, of course, here believe in making final cause great again. So when you remove the point of life, you weaken the person or peoples, because that happens to whole nations or whole countries or whole whatever you want to call them. Um, and they grow so weak that they slide into unconsciousness. So fairy tales are very deep.
Hmm.
I would never try to do a fairy tale on the channel right now, or certainly not alone, because
Yeah.
you think Peterson rambles? He's an amateur, rank amateur. I can do that trick for hours right off the top of my head on pretty much any subject. So let's do this.
Please
No,
do.
let's not do this. Let's finish the damn book club before I die. Um, Yeah, so he jumps in to the idea of, solutions at the end of the chapter, right? Like, "Oh, how do we solve all this?" Which I very much appreciate. It's like, finally, you're using my format. Of course, he wrote his book long time ago, but the idea of limiting rules and using minimum force are nice, but I posit they're unhelpful, because how do you limit the rules? How do you use minimum force? By what measure, right? And what is the justification for the measure that you come up with, right? Because that's a problem, right? Can they be determined in the moment or just in hindsight? Because to be fair, science is entirely predicated on hindsight or proper science. Like, you're supposed to start with an observation. Well, an observation is something that's already occurred that you witnessed. All of science starts with hindsight. So scientists tend, even though they're not, we'll say, using the Popperian definition of science or whatever, um, or the proper definition of science is what I would call it. They tend towards this error where they make a statement about something that could only have been known in hindsight and then say, and therefore, and I'm a big one on and therefore arguments when they're correct, but this is bad logic at some level. So I'm not sure that that's as useful as Peterson thinks it is, but it does make people feel good and it's good for the charisma. So let's just accuse him of having charisma in his writing and be done with it. Um, yeah, I can back that up too if so desired. Um, Opening up the frame for more possibilities than people narrow in on with light, putting things in light of life-threatening behavior, I thought was really good. And I thought that was a great way of reciprocally opening people. So he's kind of showing you possible other ways the story could have unfolded, sort of a thing. And that's opening people up. See, if you wanted magic of Peterson no one talks about, there it is. He opens people up in that way by basically coming up with scenarios that they haven't thought of. And this is in some sense, it's an easy trick. Well, it's easy for me. In some senses, though, it's something most people can't do. Most people get so focused on problem solving, for example, that they forget about possibility considering, which is the opposite of problem solving. Um, that's the you need to break out of the box. Yeah, the box you're breaking out of is the one you put yourself in. It's just easier not to get in the box, but different problem. Different problem. The break out of the box thing. Like, I grew up, I was at MIT when they were talking about all that garbage. I was like, "Eh, these are the smart guys, huh? Don't get in the box. Like, Don't be the cat that says if I fits, I sits. And then you won't become box shaped. Or you can make the mistake and break out of the box and come up with a million strategies for doing something that didn't need to be done. Whatever, you do you. Just saying. But I like the fact that he does open people up by being smart enough and being clever enough and writing well enough with enough charisma to get people to reconsider and consider things in a different light. And then he does this thing where he links behavior when younger with behavior when older. And I thought that was really useful too, right? Because there he is addressing the problem of identity that Jonathan Peugeot talks about, at least partially. I mean, he's still an individualist, so he can't deal with identity directly because individualism there's no place for identity in individualism. That's why there's an identity crisis. All right, before I round it out, do you want to jump in with anything, or do you want me to see if I can?
Yeah. So I think just a couple of quick thoughts. So one, just addressing the minimum necessary force thing. I do think it's important to recognize that it's highly contextual. So, and it's not presented as such. So you have the thing where, okay, well, if we're negotiating something like negotiating cost, like I shouldn't go and like there's a certain degree of like we shouldn't be shouting at each other or something like that. But also if you're dealing with like a situation where someone is dramatically misbehaving, sometimes it is necessary to have a greater show of force that isn't necessarily like just 1 degree above what that is, because that might wind up, because of the mimicry problem, you might wind up getting more escalation by just kind of letting the other person be like 1 step ahead or behind you. And he has this point about resentment spawning a desire for vengeance and that it often operates in the background under the guise of falsehoods. And I almost wonder if that is maybe a consequence of not using the necessary force. Like maybe the minimum necessary force is not a minimum of force. I would probably suggest there that in order to solve a particular problem, you need to give the proper signal. And it is possible to go way overboard, but just recognizing like, okay, we need to really nip something in the bud. It's one thing, like if you have somebody that is like walking in the middle of a crosswalk or something and they're not looking, they're staring at their phone, and that person nearly got hit by a bus and you pull them back. And then if you're just like, hey buddy, like, all right, like, hey, I knocked you on the ground, but like, we're okay. Or versus like, maybe in that moment, the person that pulled the person down and knocked them to the ground and saved their life also shouts at them to really drive the point home. That might be a little bit traumatic for the person that had that happen, but also that person's really going to remember it. So that kind of goes back to the previous point of like just accepting the fact that, yes, I've just done a high cost thing to this person, and that is also going to incur a cost on me, but also we really got to nip this in the bud. And maybe it would be a lot higher cost if this person does it again and gets hit by a bus. So, I think that that's important. And then just this, I mean, he briefly kind of goes into corporal punishment, and then just this sort of thing of like physical isolation is in fact a physical punishment. And you look at guys like, what was that guy? He called himself Charlie Bronson in England, where he was like Britain's most violent prisoner. And he was in solitary confinement. I think he might have just gotten out of jail finally after like decades, or he might be like about to, like, he's a much older guy now. But he set his prison on fire. Like he would get in fight, like he would strip down naked and then fight the guards who showed up in like the riot armor and everything. Like just crazy guy. But they kept him in solitary confinement for something like 10 or 15 years, because every time they let him out, he would start a fight. And the funny thing is, like, he's a barbarian, but he's not like stupid. Like he was just crazy and just liked to fight. And so it's just like an interesting sort of guy. But that's one of those things where it's like, well, the minimum necessary force was actually just forcing him into complete solitude for actual years. until his hormones, tapered off at the age of 65 or whatever. It was like just something completely. Usually it's like the age of 28, but this guy needed a lot more, and he's a lot more docile now.
Testosterone. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, you
and
keep people in jail until they're 28 and then let them out and they're fine. Yeah.
yeah,
Like weird.
yeah,
Man,
yeah,
man anyway. Yeah.
yeah. But this guy's probably going to need till like 70 or something. You see, it's a very impressive mustache he has, but um, I don't know, just crazy. So that was just something I was kind of thinking of, is this thing where people say, it like there is easily such a thing as flying off the handle and over disciplining someone, especially kids and
Yeah.
stuff. Or more so over punishing someone to a degree that's not appropriate, but also to recognize like timeouts and things like that are still technically corporal punishment.
Yep.
And a lot of times the psychological punishment is actually even a little bit more severe in many ways
Right.
than
Right.
those things, because that's going to wind up sticking with you. Like the person who gets, hit on the butt with a belt or something like that a few times gets the message, but
Right.
is not going to be, like psychologically damaged and resentful because of, something that was more severe but didn't leave a mark. So.
Yeah. No, I kind of skipped over that section too because I was like, whatever.
Mm.
But he, I think I'm bringing up kids in general as part of civilizing them into their culture or their nation,
Mm-hmm.
right? And he sort of hints at that. And again, I think you can kind of civilize yourself to some extent, and that's why this chapter is great for people, I think, especially people without kids. I'm not sure how helpful it is for people with kids, actually. Different problem. And magnitude and context matter. Like he makes those points pretty clearly, which is good. Like I think this is good stuff. This is super important. And discipline matters because it's part of formation, right, towards an aim and requires sacrifice on the part of the parent. The parent has to sacrifice being their children's friend, being loved, or at least getting expressions of love in the short term, all for proper formation of the child. Just
Mm.
it is what it is, right? And timeout works because it allows the child to sit with his overwhelming emotion until he or she can learn to tame it, right? It gets them in touch with their own control of their own passions. And I think that's why timeout works, especially the way Peterson did it with his son in particular, right? Where you get to ponder on your own, right? When you're ready to try again. And if you're wrong, you're going back, right? And so it's a great little easy quick hit system. And you do that with yourself. Like I've had many occasions in my life where I had to remove myself from a situation because
Yeah.
like I think I'll leave now. I might come back later, but yeah, because you can just see certain things happening, right? You could see certain things sort of coming down the road. And then he describes, well, yeah, I think you sometimes need to force attention in children, right? And that does a lot of work. Like I said, with the going off on your own, right? To deal with your anger and coming back when you're not going to be angry anymore. That's forcing a child to attend a child's attention, right? Inward in particular, which in that instance is appropriate. But then he describes his the integration of a well brought up child, um, but labels it as individuality. And I'm like, good job, Jordan, you get that backwards. What you described was a well integrated child and integrated into society, able to cope with and accept the things around them and deal with a bunch of different things. And then you called it individuality, and nothing could be further from the truth based on your description. And I think, if your child's action make you dislike them, what will those actions do to people who don't love them? I thought that was a beautiful point that he makes at the end. And you can kind of apply this to yourself on your own. Like there's actions that you do that make you not not happy with yourself. Imagine what other people feel about them, right?
Mm.
Because, yeah, there's definitely that. So that's all the notes that I have. Let's finish out your notes if you have more, and then we can go into implementation.
Yeah, no, I'm ready to move on. I have
Okay.
wiped out all of my notes for this section.
Excellent. So yeah, I mean, I think in terms of implementation, as I've sort of been hinting at all along, not so subtly, this chapter really gives you a sense for how to raise yourself, or at
Mm.
least raise yourself up, if you want to put it that way, right? Like how to be better for yourself, by yourself, on your own. That's what this chapter does ultimately. And so there's a lot of nuggets of practical advice. There's a lot of new framing, which I think is the most useful thing in the postmodern era, or error, as the case may be, is new framing, because they do away with framing and leave you floating on your own and chaotic and anarchistic, but individualistic. But you need a frame to do things. And the reason why things aren't happening and things aren't getting done in certain circles is because of a lack of structure and hierarchy and framing and care for hierarchy. Hierarchy is older than trees. It's always there. You might as well have a good one and revitalize it instead of destroying it. So I think that's more the lesson here from an implementation standpoint. What do you have for implementation that I might have missed, Castle?
Yeah, I think probably, especially if you're taking the approach of sort of raising yourself or filling in those gaps that you might have. I think something that's been on my mind recently is kind of like, and we had kind of had a very brief discussion about this the other day, actually, this thing about how a lot of times, like a certain virtue, like the associated vices will almost mirror the virtue. And so, like, there is a virtue of shame, but there's
Mm,
also a vice of shame. And so there's a certain element of this of
mm,
like, there's a healthy dose of shame of not wanting to be seen as lowly. And like, that's good. You should be putting out a good signal for people. And so
yeah,
it should hurt to think of yourself putting out a bad signal. And so,
yeah,
it's important to take, even the notes from the previous chapters, or even the one that we're about to go into, and really make sure to take care of yourself, fill in those gaps, take it seriously to do these things, while also not falling into a sort of shame that leads to despair and then actually losing momentum. It should be just that nice little bit of negative signal that you get to keep you from. It's almost like, when you're on the highway and they have those little bumps that let you know that you're going off of the lane.
yeah,
Like
yeah,
that is the proper degree of shame, that when you start going to the edge, that you start feeling the bump and you course correct. If you're just riding that the whole time, then of course you're
yeah,
going to get that Lovecraftian sense of dread. If that's,
yeah.
you have that for 70 miles, that's not good. So I think just that's one of my takeaways, and I guess suggestions for the folks at home, is that when doing this sort of thing, and maybe even imposing negative signals on other people, this is
Right.
also that thing of like not holding grudges after victory. That also, once you've made the correction, like once you see that the person is making the correction themselves and like participating properly again, like don't lean on them
Right.
continuously, or
Right.
else then they're going to lose hope. They'll lose confidence at that point. So
Hmm. Hmm.
that's pretty much what I got for this one.
Excellent. All right. So the second rule is set your house in perfect order before you criticize the world. And my version, if you will, or my enhancement is pay attention to that which you have the most control over and make it better. That's it's my version of what he's saying here. Very short chapter,
Hmm.
which is too bad because I think it's again one of the more impactful chapters. Is this one in particular? Just because it's a moving of attention, which is it's how the world works. You move attention. It's, it's how the world worlds. It's how
Hmm.
reality comes into being and everything. Time, energy, and attention focused. Bang, problem solved. So, yeah, any general questions either from the limited audience here or from yourself about this particular rule or chapter?
As
Or
far
was
as
it pretty clear? Or
questions, it seemed pretty clear from me. I'm just making
Mhm.
sure. I mean, there's a couple of statements that he makes that are outside the realm of the topic itself, I guess, that I found
Again? Okay.
questionable, right? But I'm not going to.
We'll
I
get
didn't
to
have
those.
anything I was
Yeah.
particularly curious
We'll
about.
get to those. Okay. Um, General thoughts on the chapter.
Um, so yeah, I mean, again, there's a lot of negative stuff in there. I mean, just like
Mm,
a lot of negative examples. I think that can be useful. I mean, we talked about that, but um, I think this it's going to come up later. But the thing about like the difference between like the Dutch construction of dikes versus the dikes that were made in New Orleans, I think is a really solid example of this sort of thing of becoming complacent. Like, there's that old statement like complacency kills, and it really
yeah.
is the case that if you wind up putting your attention to, oh, this will get solved in the future, or someone else is going to do this, or my attention is better placed on something far away as opposed to the stuff that's right here, the consequences can be often really disastrous. But in a sort of positive contrast to that, um, in a certain sense, what you do matters is something that you say a lot. And it's like, well, if you actually take care of the stuff that's in front of you and you attend to it as well as you possibly can, or recruit help where you're lacking competence in that area, then that's going to have positive effects very likely on all the other things that you wanted to pay attention to anyway. And it might just be that I look at like my own teenagehood, you get the whole thing where it's like, oh, I have to do 20 minutes of homework, or I have to do an hour and a half of homework or whatever it is, or I have to
Right.
take the clothes off of my bed and actually fold them and put them in the drawers. And then all of a sudden there's more than enough excuses to do 5 hours of some other highly strenuous activity to avoid the thing that was right in front of me. And
Yeah.
it's like this sort of you know constant avoidance of one's own responsibilities is also in itself sort of like a hedonism, because it is like you said, the wanting what I want when I want it. And
Hmm.
sometimes that can even be rejecting the more important responsibilities over the less important ones that are more enjoyable, or maybe get a little bit more attention. Like, no one's going to pat you on the back for folding your socks, and so it's like, if you're doing stuff for rewards, then it's probably going to wind up being a very uncomfortable thing for you, especially if you're very immature, like teenage me. Extremely painful to have to fold socks or anything like that. And so I don't know, just kind of focusing on that, and also recognizing that by doing this same sort of thing, to your previous point about maintaining momentum by completing those smaller little tasks, by actually making the effort to trying to set your house in perfect order, you actually are going to, if it becomes time to start affecting the things further outside of that, you've got momentum. Whereas you might actually just
Right.
crash and burn if you try to go and do that just right off the bat.
Right. Yeah. All right. Well, let's explore this weird chapter, because actually it is
Mhm.
a strange chapter, because he really, yeah, I don't know. I guess he approaches it backwards. Like he starts talking about serial killer or mass murder, mass killings, and I'm like,
Yeah.
what does that have to do with your house? I don't get. I don't get it.
Right.
So yeah, he jumps into that, and I'm like, I don't understand that. Um, but the people who think such things view being itself as inadequate and harsh to the point of corruption, and human being in particular is contemptible. And it's like, well, I mean, okay, I don't like where are we? Like, this is the opening of the chapter, right? Like, I'm like,
Mm.
wait, can we start near the chapter title
Yeah.
instead of here? And it's such a short chapter too, which is sort of unfortunate. Um, and then he goes into to Goethe and Faust, and it's weird. He says Mephistopheles is the eternal adversary of being. And if Mephistopheles is the representation of evil, then being itself as such must be good.
Hmm.
And there's the negative versus the positive case thing right there. Yeah, Peterson, because he's not a Christian, we'll say, um, doesn't have a positive case to make, and I think that's why the book is largely negative. Right? He's
That
also
makes sense.
pointing to what he perceives as the failure of quote liberalism, and liberalism, of course, could never have succeeded because the word liberalism doesn't can't convey data, much less information or meaning, um, because it's not bounded, right? If you say classical liberalism, I can make a case for you, but if you're going to just use the word liberalism by itself, then I know what you're talking about. No one else can ever either. So I think that's why this is negative because he's pointing
Hmm.
out the negative results of the thing he thinks failed. Um, I would say actually in a very pessimistic fashion, although he's given hope to millions. Fair enough.
Yeah. So this is something. I mean, it's interesting because I didn't really have any exposure to Tolstoy aside from just like things that had his name on them, right? And so there's like like I guess architectural things that have his name on them and stuff. And I was like, oh, that's kind of impressive. This guy must have been a big deal. But then, and I knew that he was an author, but it's unfortunate because he goes into a whole thing talking about how Tolstoy like he couldn't be allowed near rope because he would hurt himself. Like he had a great fear of doing that because he had such a nihilistic attitude towards his existence. And just kind of thinking this thing. And then I think he even says like someone he influenced wound up being a mass murderer or some sort of thing like that.
Yeah.
Um, and it's unfortunate because you just think, and he even lists like the different justifications that Tolstoy gave for like continuing living, as if you had to go on like logic, reason, and rationality that. And I'm just kind of thinking like either, you know, and like there's sort of a danger in going and like now I'm going to start exalting myself against all of these famous people and everything, but it's like, well, this guy is either not as smart as he claimed to be, or
Mm.
he was super smart and found out he found out the hard way that that wasn't sufficient,
Yeah.
and
Exactly.
he
Yeah.
just kind of reached the end of like, okay, yes, I have this capacity, but also that's not solving the problem.
Yeah.
And a lot of people are still following this guy, and it's difficult because it seems like he had some sort of experience later in life where he at least kind of found something serviceable. I'm not going to call it
Mhm.
like necessarily good enough, but he found something serviceable so he wouldn't risk hurting himself. And it seems like a lot of the people that are following this guy are not, they're making the mistake of also like following an early version of him. um, where you see that with some of these
Yeah.
figures where people will go off and do some crazy stuff and then they'll like change their mind like last minute at the end of their life, but it's like the momentum is there and no one looked at how they ended their life, and it's like, oh well, this was the answer. It's just like, no,
Luther
no.
repented. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And it's just like, okay, it's like, oh, we're following this guy, and it's just like, are you really though? Or like if I'm leading you and you're following 15-year-old me, you're in danger. If I'm
Oh,
leading
yeah.
you now and you're taking orders from whatever I was doing when I was 15, yeah, you're in danger. Like, don't do that, please. And the same thing, I think it, in a certain sense, maybe even dishonors the person to. I'm not necessarily saying that Peterson is doing this, but what a lot of people are doing with guys like Tolstoy are they're maybe dishonoring them by following in the wake of their mistakes and not like
Yeah.
how they tried to rectify it at least near the end of their life. So I thought that
Yeah.
was important for like the setting your own house in order type of thing. Like just, okay, you're following homemaking advice from someone before they got better at actually doing the thing.
Yeah. And I think, it's interesting this chapter too, because he kind of points out like Tolstoy figured it out. Logic, reason, rationality trap you into nihilism.
Hmm.
That's all they do. And I think because people in the age of gnosis, because propositions are knowledge and knowledge is the highest value, and they have no choice but to connect what they call intellect with goodness. And the problem is there's no overlap with intelligence and goodness at all. None. They're orthogonal to one another. That sorry. And we very much have like we've just lost the archetype of the evil genius. And it still pops up once in a while. The theme pops up once in a while, but we've lost the archetype. for sure. And that's part of the problem with these guys. Like, people talk about Nietzsche, and I'm like, but thus spake Zarathustra was in the foxholes all throughout the Great War. Maybe not. They'll sort of talk about like, well, yeah, that's what made the whole project work, the whole Reich project work, was Nietzsche. And it's like, okay, but Nietzsche was nihilistic and wrong. The wrong part should have been hint, but whatever, we'll just brush past that. Clearly adopting Nietzsche seems to have very bad results at all layers. Maybe, I'm just going to throw this out, maybe his life ended badly because of his philosophy, and therefore it's a bad one. I'm just speculating here. This is why, I can't. I just can't deal with this. And Tolstoy is explicit. Logic, reason, and rationality trap you into nihilism. Like, it's in the chapter. Like, fair enough. I agree. That's true. You can't get out of it. That's also true. Maybe you don't rely on those things so much. They suck anyway, and there's easier things to use to understand the world that are quicker. And they don't require all these scientific validation or anything. I don't know. I like my way better. I think that's what I'm saying. It's way easier. No combinatorial explosion, because it's another problem that happens with logic, reason, rationality, which at least John Vervaeke, Dr. Vervaeke points out, but doesn't kind of get the hint. Yeah, what you're doing is stupid. Cut it out. That's how. If I were bringing up a child, I would say to them, "What do you want me to do, Castle? What do you want me to do?" So yeah, you got more sort of thoughts around that. I mean, this weaving in and out of Tolstoy and mass killers, and then jumping into Cain and Abel. I'm like,
yeah, it's tough because I mean, it seems like one of the threads that's kind of like being drawn out of this is like the justifying revenge by one's own suffering type of thing, and he does a decent job of contrasting. I think, just showing that there's lots of people that do endure a lot of suffering, and then they don't take it out on people, or they will kind of have the problem like you. I think interestingly, he sort of vaguely references something like the point you made before about how, like, oh, if you weren't formed in a certain thing, then your parents probably weren't in something, even further back. But he doesn't mention that explicitly. It's sort of like that. He says something, I'm pretty sure, because I didn't note the exact thing and I should have, where it was like if there's a certain number of issues that weren't properly attended to, then they all kind of like fall down on you. And so, I mean, that's also is kind of another sort of contrast to that. But that those people, there are certain people that take the responsibility for it and then are able to kind of turn things around. Right. For at least for themselves and the following generations. And then he does the whole Cain slays Abel to spite God thing, which isn't obvious to me. I mean, even in the story, like he doesn't even say anything like against God, and even asks for, in a certain sense, kind of asks for help. It's I don't know. The read I get from Cain is that he's not a very smart guy.
Psychology is projection.
Yeah.
So I'm just gonna say it.
Yeah, it seemed like that was just another thing to try to give a little more credence to the point that was being made for the other guys. And
yeah. And also I think people get confused, right? He did that because is not always apparent. He did that, and this also happened. That's like I could easily just say, look, every time you sin, you're spiting God. Did you do it to spite God? Maybe not, but it still happened. Right. And so he's attributing the motive to the result, and that's not that there's no reason for that. That's random. He might be right, but there's no justification for it. Sloppy science.
Yeah, that's pretty much all I got for that section.
Yeah. So I mean, I think I have no notes for this because it's just like very depressing. Yeah, it was. I mean, he talks about clients and patterns and momentum. I'll even use that term, right? And then he lists creativity, sensitivity, and intelligence as virtues. And I sort of thought long and hard about how to kind of address that. No, I'm lying. No, they're not virtues. Absolutely not. You're insane. That's one of the craziest things I've ever heard anybody say. I'm sure he didn't mean virtues. That's the best I can do to not indict him on crimes against morality here, because also, like, I have no idea why anybody would think creativity, sensitivity, and intelligence are virtues. I don't even think they're good. Like, I don't even know what to tell you about that. We're as far apart on a thing as we can be. What did you think of that, Castle? Because I was just like, no.
That was one of the ones I just kind of skipped over. I was just like, yeah, let me just not do this. I don't know. Was that so? I know we're not following page to page like language of creation.
Yeah, we're
The
certainly not.
that I mean something that I thought was helpful, and maybe I guess if I can try to thread this in for as long as we're trying, um, the thing about finding people that you admire and then letting what's unnecessary in you die so the rest can live. I mean, that's just I'm just seeing exemplification and mimicry, and just that of the admiration aspect of I've talked about this before, like taking admiration of smiling at something, and then maybe striving for it or just being glad that it exists if you're not going to strive for it, versus envy or something else that's kind of poisonous
Right.
there. But yeah, I mean, I guess this is also kind of stuff like I know you and I have talked about, but I'm just kind of saying as relevant for the folks at home for the book club. I'm assuming this was all they watched.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, he goes into this whole thing too about Solzhenitsyn destroying the credibility of communism with a book. And I'm
Mm.
like, what? Like, what are you talking? You okay? Do you need like some medicine that hasn't been invented? Or like, why should it be required to demolish the intellectual credibility of communism with a book? Don't these people prioritize real results that are observable in real persons? And I guess not. And that is a video that's coming. It's also going to be the theme of my Substack article, my next one, when I finally sit down and try to write it again. I have part of it, but I've got to actually write the rest. Um, yeah, this idea of misplaced empathy is what I'm calling it, where people preferring things far away from them rather than things right in front of them. And academics tend to prefer ideas over people. Just that's what they are. That's the ivory tower. If you want more on that, I have a video about academia in the ivory tower. You should check it out. It's quite good. It's not even that old. It's only a few weeks ago. Yeah, I was disappointed in that. I was like, I don't like, what are we talking about here? But I guess if intellectual or intelligence is a virtue, then kind of makes sense that you need something as radical as a book to destroy. See what I mean? Like, it doesn't. You can't make it work. Would it? He's hopelessly confused, unfortunately, in this chapter in particular. But
Yeah.
what do you got, Castle?
Um, yeah, I mean, and just kind of going into the New Orleans, flooding and all that stuff. I
Mm,
mean, just the important sort of you might say obvious points, but also it wasn't obvious to the people in New Orleans, or maybe it became rapidly obvious at a certain point, and then obvious to everyone else at exactly the same time. But that just kind of taking responsibility for the stuff that is right in front of you, trying not to take things for granted, and then becoming complacent, and
yeah,
then recognizing that those sort of things wind up turning into corruption, which then itself winds up compounding over time.
yeah. It's weird when he talks a lot about corruption, but not the source of it and stuff. Because I think
Mm-hmm.
most corruption is due to the flood. Most of the corruption we have now is due to floods. It's due to equality doctrine and letting too many people into a thing. And like everyone's trying to be a writer now, and now we have StoryGrid. And as far as I'm concerned, I want to rewrite the Geneva Conventions to include if you do anything like StoryGrid, you are immediately executed publicly, and every single human is forced. I can't emphasize it. And the thing is, even people that like know that and they're like, you can't proceduralize characters or doing YouTube videos on doing precisely that. And they think they're not. And I'm like,
Mm.
oh my goodness, what happened to writing? It's all gone. We've flooded. And it's not like some of these people don't have a point, but lots of people have lots of points. Who cares? 3-year-olds have points too. You shouldn't follow them. Like, I don't get it. Yeah, it's sad. It's very sad. I think once people get the feeling in the age of gnosis that they've made a good point and that so many people resonated with it and it helped so many people, like Peterson, suffering from this to some extent, they that corrupts them because that flood of, we'll say, positive feedback just completely destroys their good work that should remain in the ivory tower and be vetted and promulgated by responsible parties we call leaders. But don't
Mm.
listen to experts is still my advice. I think in particular, the New Orleans thing is nice because it opens you up to the fact that it's not like they didn't know and it's not like they didn't have a plan. It's that corruption caused the plan to go horribly wrong and just take too long.
Mm.
And time's a factor, right? Because entropy exists and eventually, right? And besides, the Dutch are better at water management than anyone else. So we kind
Very
of suck
true.
at it.
Yeah. But we don't have that much water in most of the place, I guess.
We don't have any excess water anywhere.
Hmm.
We have a huge, freaking beautiful land. It's amazing. I mean, driving across the Midwest, for example, is just, it's like amazing. Everything's amazing. It's like, wow, this is amazing. It's so great.
Yeah.
It really is great. It's
It is.
yeah, we're quite lucky. And like if you fly over the US Castle from east to west or whatever, west to east,
Mhm.
and you can look down,
Yeah.
right? And especially if you, and you do this north to south too. East of the Appalachians is all this water. And west of the Appalachians for a little while there's water. And then there's weirdness. And then there's the mighty Mississippi. And then there's absolutely no water at all.
Yeah.
Until you get near the Black Hills, basically, near the foothills of the Rocky Mountains. It's so weird. And then if you go north to south, you look down in a plain and you see all this water, all these rivers and tributaries and whatnot, and they're all pretty much clear or blue and beautiful. And then once you get a certain ways down south on the eastern seaboard, it's all brown. All the water's brown.
Mm.
Yeah. So like we have everything, and we don't
Yeah.
have too many things in abundance in the wrong way. We'll say they're all pretty well managed because our land is very abundant, and so it's sort of adjusted to all the extremes and the flooding and all
Mm.
that very nicely. And it's got a nice balance to it. So we're quite fortunate. Everybody in the U.S. should be grateful.
It was very nice.
And it's interesting. Peterson makes this point at the end of the chapter here, where he says, "To live, we build, we build structures that we need in order to do so, basically, right?" And I'm like, yeah, like we build the structures to live, right? We can be resentful of how they don't allow us perfect freedom, right? Or we could be grateful that we have the ability to live at all. And I think that's up to you. And
Mhm.
that's, I think, the lesson I want people to take away from this chapter in particular, right? And then what that means is that you need to emphasize paying attention to your house and the things closest to you over worrying about who screwed up with Hurricane Katrina when you don't even live in New Orleans and can't possibly make a difference to that equation. Um, and be grateful for the constraints, because constraints are filters that are being done for you. And you don't know what they're filtering out. You just know that some of the things they're filtering out you think you want to have. And A, you might be wrong about that. And B, the solution isn't let the floodgates open and stop filtering, which is the anarchist view or the revolutionaries' view or the rebels' view. Do away with this thing. We don't need it. which gets into the Chesterton's fence problem, but it's really just a function of this rebellion towards, we'll say, total freedom, which makes no sense, but also this is how they talk. So
Mm.
I don't like people. That's why.
I think all I really have is just I have like five last little bullet points, pretty much, and maybe one that I could slightly harp on, and one that I could maybe also do. But the thing about you know like always trying to go and find like, oh, who caused this, what is the, instead of just going and just doing the thing, or cooperating with multiple people, or recognizing like, yes, of course, because people were in charge of this, they peopled it up, and then it just like, why are you wondering why did this happen or who did this? Like, of course it was a person that did this, or
Yeah,
probably multiple
always
persons that did this wrong or failed to
agents.
do something. And I think of like there's a line I heard recently from Saint Teresa of Avila where she described like just people helping, and she
Mhm.
just described like the help of people, including herself. She described it as dry branches that crack under the slightest pressure. It's just like, yeah, like people are fickle, they're difficult, they're going to screw something up. Like that's just kind of to be expected, but it's not supposed to be like a cause for cynicism or anything
Right.
like that. Like that's how you come to the conclusion at the end of that is very different. But I just kind of tie that with this, recognizing the limits of people he mentions, and it's just like, yeah, you're going to sometimes, and I think this is also where the sort of fantasy clashing with reality happens, where people will think, oh, the people were in charge, like this was an elected official, that was supposed to be, and you have this idea of like the ideal uh, official that is going to solve all the problems and do whatever's got to get done. And it's like, well, yeah, until you see like, well, what does their office staff look like? How quickly does it take for them to get a message across? Maybe they, how are they elected? Maybe this was probably someone's nephew, realistically, or something like that. And then, how many other things are taking up their mindset? Whereas, the New Orleans dike probably burst, and just no one was considering it. It was just like, oh yeah, whatever, like it'll be fine and everything. So that, and then to add to that, this point he makes about saying what you should when you should. And I think he also has another one that says, when something is undone, correct the omission. Just general kind of obvious advice, but just this sort of thing of just actually solving the problems as they come so that they don't wind up accumulating. When you're going in a particular direction, and he says, to stop when you apprehend that you should stop, and like right then, don't just let momentum continue
Right.
snowballing. And I think the most important of these points was he talks about your dead ancestors may have something useful that they passed on.
Yeah, yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
and I was like, yeah, that's a really useful one, especially for the thing of like, oh, we can't go back, and stuff, but also no one's looking back at, hey, what does your great 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 grandfather, assuming that was actually passed along. I mean, there's still this issue of
Right.
like some formation didn't pass along, but sometimes there's little bits that maybe just like get propositionally passed along but don't actually get implemented
Right.
correctly. And sometimes you can look back and see, oh, this person did something right, maybe no one implemented this for the last 4 generations, but I have access to this information, let me participate with it. I thought was probably the most useful thing from the end of this chapter that I found.
Yeah. He has some good stuff there. I mean, for me, how do I implement this, right? Like the title of the chapter is pretty much how you implement it, right? Like
Mm.
go in order, right? Proceduralize a little bit here, right? Sequence it at least. Um, y- you know, you have to have a good foundation, a good grounding from which to speak. And criticism is a form of speech. And so you need that engagement with your own grounding, whether it comes from the past, right, or from revivification that you did, or whatever, uh, in order to be able to have a confident, reasonable opinion on something. And people just, they're so age of gnosis. They're so like, oh, well, I read this thing and it made sense to me. And it's like, people fool you with that garbage all the time, including Peterson to some extent. Like, lots of things can be made sense of. That's not interesting. The interesting thing is what makes sense and works through time. Like, that's far more interesting, and at what cost, right? Like, anything can be made sense of, but I mean, the Incas made sense of sacrificing children. Suicide bombers make sense of, it makes sense. Is a really low bar. I'm sorry. That's why you need your house in order. Like, you need to show that doing that, getting that grounding shows that you have a place to stand to launch your ideas into the world. But first you have to have that place. It can't be you in the basement playing video games. That's for sure. Certainly not on the PS5. What an ugly console. It's you've got to be able to engage the world from a position of experience with building something, right? Which is setting your house in order. And that's what you should do, right? And maybe even an apartment, but still, like, there's a house to be set in order. You're living there. You can do these things. And pay attention to the things closest to you rather than foreign wars, past events, and trying to get to the bottom of things. Like, these are not necessarily useful. And I'm not saying don't ever do them ever or anything, but also we're spending way too much time on that stuff, and not enough time on what's really important. What do I need to fix right next to me? And, Peterson's point is simultaneously good and bad. Like, well, some people know, some people don't have eyes to see. Some of the things you know about, some of the things you don't. You can't individualism magic your way into some of this stuff. You really kind of need help. It's not, it's not possible to write an awesome book by yourself. You need Sally's art, you need Castle's editing, and positive attitude and behavior and organizational skills, right? And that's how you set your house in order, right? Don't try to do it by yourself. At least use the wisdom handed down from the past, or revivify it for yourself. If you can't get people, we'll say, active in your life to help you directly. So what do you think, Castle? How can you implement this?
Well, I tried to implement this. I think on my sort of journey here, what I'm thinking about still is the framing that you also gave at the beginning is attention. And so I want to further constrain my attention. I'll still maintain awareness when appropriate, but when it comes to setting things in order, what I'd like to do is, and what I'm going to make an effort to do starting this week, is try to take as little attention that I'm putting. I want to try to eliminate the attention that I'm putting on other people and what they're up to and that sort of thing. And just without becoming, egocentric and all these sort of things, just when trying to identify issues that need addressing, to just focus on that locally. That whatever this other person is doing, even if it's a person that maybe I work with and I see that, oh yeah, this person's got problems and stuff, but I don't have the kind of relationship with them that we can discuss this, or I can try to influence them positively, to try to just completely eliminate that from my attention, because at that point it's just kind of drawing necessary resources away from what I could be spending on stuff I can actually affect.
Great. Okay. And I want everybody at home, of course, to do that too. And then, look, we're going to do a closing reflection. And I know it's 30 minutes of silent time and no one likes that, but also super important. And then after that, we're going to do a statement of change. And that's why you should stay tuned. But let's do a quick closing reflection and integration on what we've talked about today. And the quiet time really does help. Like, this works, guys. Like, we didn't come to this out of nowhere. This is 5 years of practical research. Yeah, so that was about 30 seconds. I hope everybody participated well. So, statement of change. What will you actually change based on what we've sort of learned today in the book club? And again, I want everybody to do this. Say it out loud if you can. Feel free to type it, right? And uh, for me, I think paying better attention to how I'm not fully matured yet, because no one is, and where my attention runs astray, says the guy who was, manipulating AIs and coding and developing and doing a bunch of things while trying to go through the notes for the book. Sort of putting the kibosh on that a little bit better, and hopefully getting some reading done here when we go on vacation tomorrow. Off to the water. Yeah, that's sort of my statement of change is just a little bit more awareness on that stuff. What you got for statement of change, Castle?
Yeah, so I think sort of adding on to my implementation of this chapter of kind of constraining the attention. I think in constraining that attention, what I want to particularly attend to are these things that I have yet to set in perfect order, particularly interiorly. So certain what I'm kind of looking to focus on now is things like attachments. So the things that I am seizing by law. In effect, the stuff that I have either convinced myself or have been convinced that I can't possibly live without, but I know conceptually that I can, and not eliminating them just for the sake of eliminating everything and just lying down on the floor, or whatever, out of hyper simplicity, but so that in the cases when I'm not able to say, enjoy a particular thing that I like, or that I am put in a situation where I'm, say if I particularly want silence, but that's not an option, or I particularly want distraction, but that's not an option, to be able to just kind of be able to accept that and maybe just participate with other people with that frame in mind and try to get a bit of help with that.
Good. All right. I think we'll wrap it up there. We managed to keep it under 3 hours somehow. Miracle of miracles. See, miracles do exist. Thank you, Castle. Hopefully we'll get Gustav's next week. I don't know.
Yeah.
And slacking off on us here. Look, everyone, I our participation is a little low. I'm disappointed in my audience here, but it's all right. You can follow along with the setting intentions, the introduction of rules, the general questions, general thoughts, exploration, implementation, right, and the closing reflection, statement of change. So that's really important. Oh, see, Noah to the rescue. Noah, noticing better how often I get pulled into being vengeful towards myself. Oh, that's a good one. Or leaping into a possibility while staying away from participation. Yeah, participation is hard. Especially if you have to do it with other people who have different ideas than you do. So annoying. And so it's easy to get angry instead and be upset. So thank you for sharing. No, I do appreciate that. Yeah, I want everybody to get that out of this. It's structured this way for a reason, and I think people will benefit if they follow along with the little template that has 5 years of experiential results behind it. So listen, thanks everyone. Join in next week. We're still going. We're halfway through. Castle. It's a miracle. So yeah, we've got 3 more parts to do, and then we'll have pragmatized Peterson's a bit of a mess of a book, even further than he did. And hopefully that's helpful for you. Like the goal of this is to move his work forward, right? So, and people have been reading 12 Rules for Life and going, wow, I didn't realize all these mistakes and all these problems and all these open areas that weren't closed up. So hopefully we're doing our part, lame though it may be, to fix that. See everybody next week. Have a wonderful time. And look, the main point of this is for everybody to be better because the world needs you. So take that to heart, and I'll see you next week.